Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first council meeting for the year 2020. Today is Monday, January 13th. And as I see, we do have some speaker cards that has been coming up to the front. If there's anyone who would like to speak on an item, please feel free to submit a card and get it up here to the front, and staff will kindly present it to us. If I can have everyone please rise for the pledge to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And Madam City Clerk, if I can have a roll call, please.
Ms. DiGiovanni?
Present.
Ms. Manalo?
Present.
Dr. Rod?
Here.
Mr. Buenaventura?
Present.
Mr. Sylvester?
Present. Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from the December meeting, December 9th, regular meeting.
Motion to accept the special meeting for December 9th.
Second.
And the regular meeting of December 9th.
Second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the minutes are passed. Next item is the approval of the agenda for this evening.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Second?
Have a first and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda for this evening has been approved. Next item is the consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion to accept the items on the consent agenda for this evening. Any exceptions? Anyone?
Motion to accept consent agenda.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We have a motion to accept the items on the consent agenda for this evening.
Second.
All right, first and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the introduction of an ordinance to establish a small business commission. Is Mr. Phipps here this evening for staff?
Here he is.
Good evening, Mr. Phipps. No, it's all good. Glad to have you.
Very happy to be here tonight addressing you guys on the subject of the formation of a small business commission pursuant to a small business commission ordinance. And I have a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first portion of this presentation, thank you, contains a discussion of why we are considering the formation of a small business commission in the first place. The second portion of this presentation discusses details associated with the ordinance that would form the Small Business Commission. So without further ado, let's jump in. So the primary problem that we're trying to address in forming a Small Business Commission is the fact that managing and operating a small business in the Bay Area is difficult. The primary challenges associated with this are numerous. However, some of the primary ones include competition from other firms, both big and small, as well as the rise of additional forms of retail, which we're seeing in the form of online retail and e-commerce, which currently represent about 10% of total retail sales, but is increasing dramatically on an annual scale. Competition by itself, however, is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it can be very good for market efficiency. The problem with competition comes when the ability to succeed is unequally balanced. And this is what we're seeing with small businesses. So generally, this inequality comes in three forms: asymmetric information. Large businesses have more information than small businesses. Market barriers to entry. Larger businesses are more easily able to enter and exit markets relative to small businesses. And access to capital and financing. Small businesses have a harder time issuing debt and creating capital to change their business or to grow their business relative to large businesses. So the results of this is that small business success is overall diminished, and that is a problem. The reason why we're concerned with the success of small business is because small businesses create and provide significant community value. Small businesses invigorate neighborhoods. They help define cities. They make them vibrant and authentic places to live, work, and visit. They do this through a number of means, starting with enhancing neighborhood character, creating place, providing entrepreneurial opportunities for citizens, creating jobs. For example, 62% of net new jobs have been created by small businesses since 1995. Small businesses have potential for innovation, they have potential for high growth, and they have the potential to increase municipal revenues in the form of sales tax and gross receipts tax. So the benefits are numerous: social, economic, and experiential. And city support is needed for these small businesses to maximize success in our community. So with these problems and benefits in mind, Small Business Commission has outlined a number of potential duties. These duties include the establishment of an effective liaison between the city, local businesses, and small business groups, creating a collaborative environment for local businesses to voice their desires, concerns, and hopes in connection with business ownership and management in the city, encourage strategies that support the functioning of small businesses in the city, and finally, to foster programs that promote and celebrate the small business community. And as you can see, these duties have been worded fairly generally. This was done intentionally so that Commission can easily respond to feedback and ideas from the small business community as well as from the Commission members. In order to make sure our ordinance language is clear, two terms have been defined which relate to the kinds of businesses that are eligible to participate on the Small Business Commission. First, we've defined brick and mortar establishment. We define that as a building or structure, including residential structures, that represents the primary place of business for one or multiple active businesses. And we've defined this term to create a discrepancy between in-town and out-of-town businesses, which you'll see more of on the next slide. Second, we've defined small business. Small business is defined as a privately owned corporation, partnership, or sole proprietorship with reported annual gross receipts not exceeding $1 million US. This term was defined to ensure that our ordinance targets the appropriate subset of businesses in the community. Other measures of small business, like federal measures, for instance, those provided by the US SBA, the Small Business Administration, are not appropriate for the city of Daly City. The reason they're not appropriate is because their measurement of small businesses is too large for our small business community, for our business community in general. For example, small businesses defined by the SBA can range in size up to 1,500 employees and can range in profit up to $38.5 million per year. If we were to use US SBA standards for our definition of small business, we would be targeting nearly all, if not all, businesses in Daly City. And if we did that, this wouldn't be much of a small business commission in the first place. It would be a business commission. So again, our $1 million threshold is based on available city data. And when we look at specifics, we see that the vast majority of our local businesses make less than $1 million per year. To be specific, it's 81%. Moreover, when assessing what businesses fall above and below the threshold boundary, we observe that many national credit tenants and businesses that we would colloquially define as large businesses fall above this $1 million threshold, whereas many businesses that are local and that we would colloquially define as small businesses fall below the $1 million threshold. So in this way, our definition of small business targets the appropriate subset of the business community, and again, applies to 81% of all the in-town businesses in the city. So going back to some details of the ordinance, with respect to membership, the ordinance has been written such that 3 of the 5 commission members must have business licenses in the city, as well as physical store locations, which we have formally defined as a brick and mortar establishment. 2 of the 5 members may be out-of-town businesses. When I use the term maybe, I mean it is not necessarily the case that they must be out-of-town businesses. And by out-of-town, I mean that they have a business license in the city of Daly City. However, they do not have a physical store location in the city of Daly City. So examples of these types of businesses, there are a number of them. However, some examples include contractors, caterers, painting companies, transportation companies, delivery companies, among others. With respect to meeting frequency, it's envisioned that this commission will hold 6 regular meetings in every calendar year and will meet on the second Thursday of every other month at 6 p.m. In order to ensure our definition of small business pursuant to this ordinance is representative of local economic conditions, over time, the Economic and Community Development Department will be making annual adjustments to the gross receipts threshold that we've currently set at $1 million that defines small businesses by linking future adjustments to changes in the consumer price index for all urban consumers. That's also known as the CPIU for the San Francisco, Oakland, and Hayward, California metropolitan area. These adjustments will be made annually. So to just give some additional background there, the CPIU for SF Oakland Hayward metro area represents a benchmark inflation guide for this region's economy. It measures the changes in the price of a basket of goods and services purchased by urban consumers and is a good benchmark to measure the cost of living in a given area. With respect to fiscal impact, the initial budget for this commission is fairly limited and not expected to exceed $3,000 per year. In conclusion, it's recommended that City Council adopt the ordinance to establish and form a small business commission in the city. The Small Business Commission will, in summary, help address the unequal playing field associated with owning a small business in the Bay Area and in the city of Daly City specifically. The Small Business Commission aims to maximize the benefits of small businesses to the community and aims to create a meaningful support foundation for small businesses in the city. Thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Phipps. What I'd like to do now is open it up to my colleagues for additional questions you may have of Mr. Phipps pertaining to his presentation. Before we do so, I'd like to acknowledge Vice Mayor Manalo. I know this was a brainchild of hers, and I'm happy that we've moved ahead and staff has gotten us to this point. So with that, I'll open it up to my colleagues for discussion. Nobody has any comments? Okay.
Mayor?
Yes.
Mayor. Yeah, first of all, I'll say it's an excellent presentation. It's a great idea to focus on our small businesses because we have a lot of family-owned businesses that are not highlighted. Are they going to be outreach through the grocery receipts and then there will be mailed out information on how to apply?
So we envision undertaking an outreach strategy to make sure that we connect with his.
On the grocery receipts and then mail them the application?
Correct.
Like our commission?
Correct. Our definition of small business is dependent on gross receipts, and lucky for us, we have that data available. The data is confidential, so we will not be releasing it to the public. However, for our own purposes and measuring of who is qualified to be eligible, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I'm in support.
Anyone?
Great presentation.
Mr. Phipps, thank you for the presentation. I think it's much needed. It's kind of long overdue. Kudos to Vice Mayor Manalo and for this project to manifest to itself. I think that this has great potential for business and economic growth, fiscally, also in terms of the benefit for the whole community of Daly City. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Mayor. So I have a couple of questions. The first one being, I know that the commission meetings we have, some of them are not actually televised, and I'd like to find a way to somehow incorporate or codify in our ordinance that the meeting of the Small Business Commission should be televised in a public forum, something like the Planning Commission meetings are done and the Library Commission meetings. So that's one suggestion. The other one is, I'm a little, I'm sure we can make it work, but you are putting the burden on 3 of the 5 commissioner members must have businesses in Daly City, which I understand. As I see it, the appointments are going to be made, as traditionally has been done, each council member makes an appointment. So that would mean 3 of the appointments have to be restrained somewhat in their selection. So if do you understand what I'm saying? So,
Like who chooses?
Right.
Yeah, who chooses which is the brick and mortar or what
Right.
nomination? Is that your question?
and again, I think we can make it work. We all get along. We're going to make our appointments. But I'm wondering do we need a restriction that will hamper some of the outstanding appointments yet to be made if they fall out of that 3? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. First, just to clarify, all members of the commission can be in-town business owners, meaning that they have a brick and mortar establishment in the city of Daly City. 2 of them may be out-of-town businesses, meaning that they have a business license but do not have a brick and mortar establishment in the city. So if you would like to reduce the amount of restriction associated with requiring a particular member of the commission to have a business in the city, I think that we're open to being flexible on that, and we defer to council opinion.
Yeah, no, I see the logic, and it makes sense why you would want that requirement. I'm just thinking practically if it's going to constrain us, but I'd leave it up to the council to make that weigh in that decision. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buenaventura. I have 2 questions. Have we denoted what will be the term of the commissioners on this particular commission? 2 years, 3 years?
Yes, I believe the term is 4 years.
How many?
4.
4.
4. However, at initial appointment, some of the term lengths will be staggered in order to generate a kind of a revolving
Continuity.
door of sorts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we should consider the 4-year term and additional restrictions, because what if those particular businesses go out of business? I mean,
One of the requirements for being a member of the commission is that your city, you remain to be the owner of the same business that you started the commission with.
Okay.
So,
Right.
sorry for the business that doesn't perform as well as they would like, but we would not allow them to continue to be on the commission.
sure, and they should stay up to date on their business license and et cetera. It was assumed that would be part of it. Another point you had in your slide presentation was a fiscal budget of approximately $3,000 a year. What would that money be used for them to go out and, I don't know, I have no idea.
It's envisioned that those monies will be purely administrative.
Administrative.
Yes.
Like, say, for you to keep tabs of the meeting or staff, perhaps, or?
Yes, to make copies, perhaps to buy sandwiches for commission members, and it's a not to exceed. So I don't think the intention is to spend $2,999. I think the intention is to stay as below budget as possible. However, this doesn't preclude us from approving additional increases to that budget based on strategies that are identified by commission members and the small business community.
That's a good answer, Mr. Phipps. Well thought out. Thank you.
Thank you,
All
Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? So, Mr. Buenaventura had a concern, and we took notes on that. If we need to move forward and maybe readjust brick and mortar, or not to restrict.
Yeah. I had actually another issue, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
So the $1 million threshold that you established, I want a bit of information on this. So this is going to be a small business commission. What I'm concerned about is, does the $1 million threshold make it essentially a more bigger business commission? And I guess I'm curious about how did you get to the $1 million mark rather than much lower, so that it sort of focuses on small businesses and we don't get away into having big business sort of dominate?
Sure. So the $1 million threshold was arrived at based on a review of city gross receipts, taxes received from functioning small businesses in the community. When we look at the breakdown or the kinds of businesses that fall above and below this threshold, we tend to see a lot of national credit tenants falling above it. So traditionally, what we would consider as a large business, based on our review, would not be allowed to participate. But the $1 million threshold, of course, means that anything under it is eligible to participate. And what we see is that all of our small businesses, or the vast majority of our small businesses, our locally owned businesses in the community, are going to be allowed to be members, are going to be allowed to participate. However, we want to be sensitive to where we draw this threshold to make sure that we're also being inclusive to other members of the community or other businesses in the community. And based on our understanding, a $1 million gross receipts is not considered extremely high as far as business success is concerned. So this is a nice way for us to target a good chunk of our existing businesses in Daly City. As mentioned, 81% of in-town businesses would be eligible to participate. But our big concern was we don't want to go too high, just to get at what you were mentioning, that we don't want larger businesses to be able to come into this commission and, for lack of a better term, control the kinds of strategies that we create and that we discuss. So I think that there is, the focus is to make sure that we are able to elevate the small businesses in the community. And based on our review of city data and our understanding of what businesses fall above and below that threshold, we thought that it was a reasonable number.
Okay. And my final question is that it sort of relates to what you were talking about, but in terms of any conflict of interest of the businesses, how is that going to be governed, and what checks and do you think you might have in place for that?
At this time, we haven't written any specific checks and balances in. I would defer maybe to legal counsel.
I can respond to that, Ray. So if there is a conflict, they would have to recuse themselves, just per the Brown Act.
Okay.
So that's really the check, is that anybody who would have a potential conflict that would come before them or come before the council, they would recuse themselves from voting.
Okay. Do we need to incorporate that in the ordinance?
Not necessarily, no. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Wow. Similar to what our other commissioners do, like, say, for instance, if you live within a certain distance of a project that's being discussed, you should recuse yourself. And I know we're looking into cannabis, and so if a cannabis issue came up, and person, if he or she is involved in cannabis sales, for instance, they should recuse themselves. Very good question, Mr. Buenaventura. I see the vice mayor is kind of moving in her chair a lot, so what I like to do now is defer to the vice mayor, since this was her brainchild, and I'm sure the vice mayor has some thoughts as to what she originally envisioned, and if this is what you would like for Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank the staff for putting together this presentation and doing the analysis on the small businesses we have currently in Daly City. One question I have is about the membership. Along the lines of 205 maybe out-of-towners, but must have active business licenses in the city. A scenario I would say is, what if there was someone that had an active business license in the city, but not a brick and mortar. You know what I'm saying? Like, is this what this pertains to?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, they would be considered an out-of-towner in the sense that they do business in the city of Daly City. However, they do not
That's
have
the definition of it.
they don't have a physical store location in the city.
Okay. Yeah, well, you know, the intent of the Small Business Commission and why it was brought about was really around supporting our local small businesses. And I know the threshold is, the maximum is 1 million, but really through your analysis, it shows how much small businesses, the amount of gross receipts they have, and really to support that. I mean, we all shop and eat at the local businesses or restaurants around there, but how do we enhance that? And how to make sure that we are capturing the benefits out there to help these small businesses. Number two is also to bring business into Daly City. If there are individuals or enterprises that want to start, how do we ensure that they have the tools to start these small businesses within our neighborhoods, within our local, so that, you know, there's more restaurants out there, that there's more opportunities for maybe a woman that has her catering business at home but would like to expand to a brick and mortar. So it's really around that. As you mentioned, it is the fabric also of our community, and a big, I think it's just, it spurs other economic development, and in essence helps our communities all together. So for me, I'm so happy that we have staff on board to be able to be there for the new commissioners in the future, and I am very thankful with my colleagues with all of the questions that pertain to Small Business Commission. Its really intent is to support our local small businesses and also hope to bring in new businesses in our community.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. Did I see a hand up from Councilmember DiGiovanni for additional?
No, what I was going to suggest is, I know that each of us typically that's protocol that we appoint someone, but I don't want to break our protocol. But when the applications come in, I know that in some cities, even though we're Daly City, that the whole council interviews the people, and then they make a decision with each other to make sure that there's no crossover, especially in the business. But it's just a suggestion, but I don't want to break our protocol because I know that's been tradition in Daly City. So I was just going to put that out there, but thank you, Mayor.
You know, I think that's an excellent suggestion. Madam City Attorney, I would believe if we did do maybe interviews and council were to come together to interview folks, it would have to be noticed.
Yes.
And
it would more than likely be in the
form of a study session.
No, I'm not, I don't think I think that would be burdensome to the process and would, I mean, I think when someone applies, the application is generally distributed to all of us. And so I think a better practice is to just have the individual council members, if they are interested in interviewing them, just set up a time and interview that person, rather than burdening the process and slowing it down and having scheduled interviews and having notices. I'd like to get this moving. I'd like to make appointments right now if we can. And so, because there's people I think would be perfect for this commission, but I don't think we need to overly burden the process by requiring formal interviews that we, you know, encourage and have noticed meetings. That's my suggestion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Buenaventura. Noted. Are there any other further comments? Yes, Madam City Attorney.
Just procedurally, if we can open and close the public hearing.
That's the next part I was about to go through, right. I was glancing over to see if we have any cards on this particular item, so what I'd like to do now is open, obtain a motion from my colleagues to now open this matter up to the public.
Motion to open.
We have a first?
Second.
Second, okay. I have no cards at this time.
Oh, I'm sorry. She just gave me one.
Come up,
Oh, you wanna-
okay.
I think we might
Oh,
have
yeah, you
two.
do.
We have Is this for item number 9?
Oh, no, this one is for JUSD.
Okay, I'll take that one
Yeah.
too. That's number 10, I think, right? Okay, so with that, we now have an open hearing at this particular time, and we have one card. Ms. Mary Ann Mann, please. Thank you.
Good evening, and I'd like to thank Jocelyn for thinking of the small businesses in Daly City. When I first bought a business in Daly City, it was in 1970-ish, but it was a whole different ballgame. And what I hope your commission does is look at what was happening then. There was the Mission Merchants Association, the Westlake, all of them, Serramonte, they all had their associations. And what they would do is get together and promote some kind of activity. Sometimes the Mission Merchants would do their things, you know, and then Serramonte would, but then they would gather together so that the important thing is we have so many vacancies on Mission Street, so many vacancies that we want to promote. If the commission would be willing to work with small businesses and maybe come up with some idea of a plan to promote it, I think in my own personal age-old mind that this would work, because when businesses work together, everyone feels comfortable and they shop at each other's and they just, I had 2 rather successful businesses and I did very well, but it was because everyone on Mission Street at that time supported each other. And I hope your commission goes back in the events that we had on the Mission Merchants, whatever. I know when I was president, they had a march and a whatever. They had a kids thing, and I know the other associations did also. So I'm hopeful that they would go back and check the records and maybe bring some of that stuff back. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mann. Are there any other cards? I don't have any. Okay, seeing none, I will request permission to close the hearing.
Move to close.
Second, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, next act of protocols for the motion for the city attorney to read by title only. We need a motion? I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a first and a second. Madam City Attorney?
This is an ordinance of the City of Daly City adding Chapter 2.58 of Title II of the Daly City Municipal Code regarding Small Business Commission.
All right, and the next recommended action is for a council member to introduce the ordinance. And I would like Vice Mayor Manalo to introduce the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A motion to introduce the ordinance to establish a small business commission.
Very good. No vote. Thank you, Vice Mayor Manalo. So that's it. We move on.
We move on. It'll come on to second reading for adoption at the next council member.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, staff. Mr. Phipps, thank you very much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the general plan amendment, item number 10, GPA-9-18-1366, a zone change for Z as in zebra, C as in Charles, -9-18-13662, design review, mitigated negative declaration, CEQA, -9-18-1364, the Jefferson Union High School District Faculty and Staff Housing Project at 699 Serramonte Boulevard. And I'll turn it over to staff. Ms. Morales, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carmelissa Morales, and I'll be presenting on the Jefferson Union High School District Faculty and Staff Housing Project. On December 3rd, 2019, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and recommended approval for this project. There were several public comments received during that time, more so related to the future redevelopment of the campus. The district is here, and in case there are any questions related to that. Okay, so this is a map showing the project site. It is located at 699 Serramonte Boulevard. It is at the northwest section of the campus. It is currently a student parking lot, and it leaks in a little bit into the eastern parking lot you see to the east of Campus Drive. Some background information on this project. The district is in need of affordable rental housing to attract and retain teachers and staff. So with the help of Measure J, which authorized $33 million in locally controlled funds, they were able to propose a project that will hopefully attract and hire and retain teachers and staff. And the district will have a presentation on this shortly after mine. The project scope includes a 4-story apartment building surrounding a central courtyard. I'll have some photos of that later. It includes 122 units proposed with 55 one-bedroom units, 61 two-bedroom, and 6 3-bedroom units. There is also an automated car lift system proposed within a car barn that will be located in the western parking lot and can provide about 78 spaces. The open space areas include some play areas, some seating, and a barbecue area for the tenants to use. Lastly, the project includes the relocation of Campus Drive, so it will no longer, so the proposed building is where existing Campus Drive is. It will be proposed right near the eastern parking lot. So the next few slides will just show you some site photos of the existing conditions. As you can see here, it shows proposed Campus Drive and project site to the left, and the existing Campus Drive will be cutting through the building, or as it stands, it is where the building will be located. This is a photo of the project site from Serramonte Boulevard, again showing existing Campus Drive. And this is showing a little bit west, again on Serramonte Boulevard. And as I've stated, this is the eastern parking lot if you're facing the project site. The courtyard will enter right straight forward. This is the project site facing north towards Serramonte Boulevard. This is where existing Campus Drive is. This is a site plan of the proposed project. You'll see it at the northwest corner, and you'll also see the remainder of the campus, and the existing building is just south of it. This is an enlarged site plan which shows the proposed building. You'll see the western parking lot to the left. The right is the current existing parking lot, and then some spaces that are going to be along Campus Drive. The next few slides will show the floor plans of the proposed building. The ground floor plan is the most unique out of the other three. The other ones are just rooms, so the common spaces will be all located on the ground floor, which includes fitness room, a community room, some co-working areas, etc. This is the second floor, the third floor, and the fourth floor, all generally the same. And lastly, the roof plan, there's not really any roof access, only for maintenance. There is a elevator that goes up, but like I said, just for maintenance. And here's the landscape plan. You can see a good visual of what the courtyard is envisioned to be, as well as the new western parking lot where the car barn will be located, just be left of the island. And the next few photos are of the proposed elevations. This is the north and south elevation. The top elevation is what you would see from Serramonte Boulevard. This is the east elevation, so if you were to enter the new proposed Campus Drive, you'll see these as you enter to the right. And if you enter the courtyard, these are the elevations you would see, and I'll have some renderings of that up next. This is the proposed car barn, so the automated lift, the car lift system will be located inside. It matches the design of the proposed building. And here are a few renderings of the apartment complex. And that's inside the courtyard. And just as I discussed the parking analysis, this is just a visual of what the parking plan is envisioned to be. There will be about 180 spaces, approximately 180 spaces dedicated to the proposed residential use, and the remaining spaces will be allocated to the existing uses. So the zoning code requires 375 spaces for the entire campus, 217 for the residential use, and 158 for all other uses, and that includes churches, community uses, gyms, et cetera. Specifically for the public school, the zoning code does not require any parking, so that's been excluded from the parking count. In total, 310 spaces are proposed for the entire campus, and 183 specifically are dedicated to the residential use. When the project does not comply with the zoning code, specifically in regards to the parking requirement, we require a parking analysis, and that was what was submitted by the applicant. They analyzed the parking, Farron Piers is the consultant who analyzed the parking situation on the campus, and they used the uses that would be in existence when the proposed building would begin occupancy, so not necessarily at this point, but expected to be in summer 2021. The way that they calculated it was based on their days of use, so some operate mainly on the weekdays and some operate on the weekday evenings or weekends. And based on their analysis, they determined that 292 spaces are required on the weekdays, or for the weekday uses, and 305 are required for the weekend and weekday evening uses, which, in conclusion, they determined that the proposed parking of 310 total is sufficient for the campus. Staff has included a condition of approval in the event that there are parking issues, that they conduct another parking analysis or provide additional parking. I apologize, it's a little finicky. As for the design review criteria, in general, staff is satisfied with the overall building design. It has a more contemporary architectural feel to it. The courtyard is very inviting. It also helps with prevailing winds. And also there's varied siding and cantilevered windows and balconies, which allow for more facade articulation, which breaks up the building. And lastly, as you saw in the previous slides, the carbon will match the design of the apartment building. This project does require a amendment to the general plan and the plant development district. The project as proposed will have a density of 37 dwelling units per acre. And currently this project site is zoned or has a general plan designation of commercial office. So that will be changed to residential high density, which allows for that density. As for the PD 31 development or PD 31 zoning district, it has very specific requirements related to apartment buildings. So in order to allow the proposed use, we had to make some modifications to PD 31, which will now be called PD 31A. In regards to affordable housing, from my understanding, the district does envision the most of the units to be affordable, but the city does require at least 10% of all rental units to be affordable based on the San Mateo County standards. So the applicant is proposing to write at least 12 affordable units. And if there are any questions on that, they will speak on that. As for the environmental assessment, an initial study was conducted for the project, and a mitigated negative declaration was determined to be the appropriate level of environmental review. The review periods ended in late December of last year, and the mitigation measures that were proposed or that are recommended are included in the mitigation monitoring and reporting program that's an attachment to the staff report. There were some comments received from Caltrans and the Department of Toxic Substances Control. The responses from our environmental consultant are included in the staff report, but we determined that the comments did not raise any new significant information related to new or substantially more severe significant environmental impacts. And if there are any questions on that, our environmental consultant is here to answer any questions. Lastly, the last few slides are in regards to the findings that are also outlined in the staff report. And in conclusion, staff recommends that the City Council adopt the findings as outlined in the staff report, affirm the environmental assessment, and approve the general plan amendment, zone change, and design review, subject to the conditions of approval in the staff report. I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. We do have the applicant here also to provide, were they going to make a presentation as well prior to us? Or?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, I think maybe a lot of questions and concerns that council may have may be addressed from the presentation from your applicant. So I suggest we should hear from the applicant as well before we move on. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Kalima Salahuddin. I'm the president of the board for the Jefferson Union High School District.
And I'm Andy Lee, board member with the Jefferson Union High School District.
So we're very, very grateful, Honorable Mayor and other members of the council for having us here and hearing us out today. So quickly, why we did this. When I ran to be a school board member, I didn't think I was going to be in the residential development business. So it's been an interesting journey, but the need was significant, and so we dove in with both feet. The quote here is that public schools can play a significant role in the general improvement of our respective communities and can operate as a major platform in enhancing child welfare in the community. I'm a huge proponent of public education. That's why I do this. And I want to ensure that all of our students, especially those in Daly City, receive an adequate education. In order to do so, recruiting, training, and retaining our staff is extremely important. As you may know, or if you don't know, I'm about to tell you, the teacher and staff pipeline in California is drying up. More and more, there are fewer and fewer people that want to go into this profession. And there's a variety of reasons why, and that is exacerbated in our area because of the high cost of living. So retaining the teachers and staff that we currently have is critical. We are currently experiencing about 20% turnover every year. That is devastating for our school district. When we talk about not just the impact and to teacher morale and staff morale with constant turnover, but we also talk about the money that we put into our teachers and staff in regards to professional development that we lose in constantly having to retrain teachers and staff. So in analysis, I compare us to the Oakland A's. We bring in our teachers and staff, we train them, and then they leave to go someplace else so they can get a higher, more salary. So this is a way to make us more competitive. Again, San Mateo County is a district that has a huge variety of income levels. And so we are one of the lower funded school district, and we are the lowest funded high school district in San Mateo County. And if you can drive 20 minutes, you can go to a school district or work at a high school district where their per pupil spending is almost twice as much as ours. And so a teacher or a staff member can leave our district, drive 20 minutes, and make double their salary. And so how do we compete with that? And again, the high cost of living here also exacerbates the amount of money that we can pay our teachers and staff. So the huge amount of their salary is going to paying their rent. So in looking at these issues, our board was trying to find up a creative solution in order to address this issue. We know it's not the solution for all of our teachers. This is a multi-pronged approach, and this was one of the pathways that we decided to walk down. So on the next slide. When we looked into possibly going and building workforce housing for our teachers and staff, we did a survey. And this got a little bit skewed, but 25% of our teachers teachers and staff were very interested, and 14% were somewhat interested. But the data point that stood out to me was 35% of our teachers and staff intended to leave the district in the next couple of years due to the housing costs or lack of housing. So that was an alarm bell. It really set off an alarm for all of us. That is a high number. And then we started this year really challenged to fill all of our teachers and staff roles, and we started the school year missing staff members. And that's huge for a high school student to start their school and not have a permanent teacher or staff person in place. We are land rich, and that's one of the blessings that we have. So how do we utilize our land in order to address this problem? Our district office had extra land, and it is centrally located within our district, making it easier for our teachers and staff to travel to their respective schools. It's also centrally located in terms of transportation. It's a major transportation hub. It's right near the freeway. We have very supportive neighbors and community. We were very blessed to pass our bond in support of the teacher housing. We were the first of anyone to pass a bond in support of workforce housing in the nation. And that allows us to keep our rents low so that we stay around 50% below market rate. We have our labor partners here. They obviously pulled public cars, and you'll hear from them later, but they've been very supportive of this project, and we've been working with them hand in hand. We have a lot of support from our state and federal legislators who all endorsed the bond and have been really helping us through this process. And again, we're working with our tenants. I know that there was an issue at the Planning Commission meeting that we worked out. Again, this is a new path for us, and we are going to make mistakes. And so we were thankful that we were given the time to reach out to the tenant that had the issue, resolve the issue so that this project isn't impacting their place of business. They can continue to do business while this project is going on, and they're here to speak tonight if you have any questions.
Okay, going on to the next slide. So just to reiterate our goal, to make 122 high-quality housing units available to the district, current and future teachers and staff members at reduced rental rates, thereby improving the district's ability to attract and retain the highly qualified faculty and staff, improving education for all of our community. We can't emphasize this point enough. I mean, this really is about taking care of the people who are taking care of our students, all of our students. Next slide. And really, I mean, staff, Ms. Morales did a wonderful job actually describing the project, so we won't belabor this point. But once again, 122 units, 4 stories, 55 one-bedroom units, 61 two-bedroom units, 6 three-bedroom units. Again, we intend to target 50% below market rate rent for our staff. We've already hired a part-time district employee who is actually going to help development of the housing board and its resident parameters. Many have already seen the images of the community spaces, the playgrounds, parking spaces, and how close it is to public transit. And as you well know, 3 of our schools are within basically a 5-minute drive of the location, and the Pacifica schools are within 8 and 12 minutes of the location. So it's going to be incredibly convenient for the staff who do live there. And that's really all we have to present this evening. We did have additional slides that we did prepare, and we do have our design team here to prepared to answer any questions related to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President Salahuddin and Member Mr. Daly. And with that, if you can, I guess, stand by, because we're going to open it now to council for any questions of either staff or the applicant. And then we'll open the hearing, because we do have a few cards. So before we open up the hearing, I'd like to hear from my council members as to your thoughts and opinions. Anyone? Madam Vice Mayor?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, we are in a need of workforce housing and housing in general, and most especially supporting teachers in our public school system. You know, it makes sense to have housing for our teachers and really be able to retain the teachers and also bring other teachers in that want to come into the district. I'm definitely a proud, graduate of our public school system and JUHSD. And so for me, this is about the students now and the future, right? If we're hearing that retention, that people want to leave if there's an increase in their housing, rent, et cetera, in the next year or so, and there's 35% that's saying that, that's a huge signal. This went to the voters, it went to our community and supported like a bond, and I'm glad to hear that actually within our communities, we value our teachers, that's showing it past. And to hear that it's actually the first in the nation, it's great to know that our community cares about the teachers that serve our students. Looking at the plan, it is a good amount of units there. 122 is not a small amount of units. For me, hearing the presentation around 50% AMI is huge. That means that teachers are going to be able to afford these units and also be able to hopefully save. At 50% AMI, that's a level that is affordable, hopefully. And then seeing also how it's catered to different unit sizes as far as families. I like that there's a lot of 2 bedrooms. There's not a lot of developments that can offer 2 bedrooms in the community. And so if anything, it shows an opportunity. For instance, if there's a young teacher that finally wants to settle down, have a family, it gives that opportunity for them. Because if anything, if they were to have a studio, that's their rent is going to be cheaper. But once they start looking for larger units at market rate, that's the issue that's probably happening when they start having families. So looking at how the product type that is mentioned here with the district, providing those different unit types is very useful, and I think forward thinking around really what the staff needs are. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Council Member.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say that, it's a well-thought-out plan, and I know you guys really put a lot into it, a lot of work, a lot of thinking about it, like the continuity of the students, because I know the dedication that district puts in for each student is not just a turnover all the time, and the teachers put their heart and soul into everything they do and never ask for anything more, and a lot of them were crying and didn't even want to leave the district, and that they didn't have a choice at that time. So now that we can have some sustainability for our students, it's well done and the first in the nation. 50% is incredible. And I know Kalima and Andy and Rosie and Terry and everybody that you worked on this really hard, because I saw it for firsthand, and the teachers as well, AFT. So how can we not support our teachers? Long overdue, but it's not, it can't go back, but we can go forward and let them know that we do respect them, we value them, and that people don't want them to leave. And a child gets traumatized when they change teachers. We all know that. The continuity needs to be there for our community. So I applaud you and thank you. And hopefully the build will be quick.
All right, thank you, Council Member. Dr. Rod.
First, I just want to say thank you to the staff and people from the district for coming out and also working together to propose this type of housing. It's, like I said, it's historic. I think most importantly, not only giving stability for the teachers to have affordable housing, but it's really, really, really important to have teachers that are from or live in the places where the students are from. Being an educator myself, grooming teachers in San Francisco and the Bay Area to ride the same bus lines that the students ride, to eat the same places, to walk the same streets, to shop at the same stores. It gives them a deeper understanding of where they're coming from. Because classroom is more than just delivery of content, it's to transform the students' lives. So I think that if the teachers can have a place where they're rooted and anchored in the community, it gives them a sense of, oh, I know where that student's coming from. He's probably having a bad day. You know why? Because this guy probably had Takis and hot Cheetos, right? And they come in the classroom like they're hungry, right? And then teachers will be like, why are you tripping? How come you're not doing your work? But if they understand where they're coming from, there's a wholeness of understanding where the students are coming from. So I applaud this project, but I have a few questions. Was there a traffic report that's done? Because I know there's all these different developments in the pipeline, and I just want to know if there's any like conversations with Caltrans or anything.
Yeah, so there was a traffic study that was prepared for the project, and it was incorporated into the initial study. I believe they studied major intersections in or near the project site. I believe the mitigation measures are allocating some fair share contributions for future city infrastructure work. But we do have our environmental consultant here to speak on that if you have any additional questions.
Okay. But there's conversations with doing that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry about that.
Okay.
They will be required to apply for a Caltrans encroachment permit, so there will be a process there after the approval.
Okay. Are there any partnerships with any, like, I know there's like a community garden in that area as well. Is there any potential possibilities of using some of that open space for continued work with the community garden, or I don't know if that's to the district or?
So, this plan right now does not impact the community garden.
Okay.
We can talk about the future development because we are looking to further develop that property. And so that would be something for the future, but right now this doesn't impact the garden.
Okay. And I don't know who this question will be directed to, but is there potential to have some sort of commercial retail in that area as well? Like a cafe or? You might as well stay up here now.
So again, right now our focus is just to look at our workforce and housing and get that through before we look at any other development, because that's the most important thing for us right now.
All right. I think I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rod. Mr. Buenaventura.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think this is a great project, and I applaud you all for bringing this forward. So, you know, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to have to ask it for the public's consumption. And I think you invited an answer to this, which is, I watched the last Planning Commission meeting, and I wanted to just have some clarity on what was the problem and how did you resolve it? So if you could speak to that, I would appreciate.
So there was two issues. The first issue was part of the construction impeded on Head Start, its playground. And so we met with them, we fixed the issue, they adjusted their playground so it's no longer in the way of construction. And that work has been done already, and Head Start can speak more to that, they're here as well. The second issue is that we are looking at future development of that area. And so there is no concrete plans right now. It's all in the development phases, and the staff here at the city has been extremely helpful working that out with us. So again, these are two separate issues. There's something needs to be done with that site. And so we're trying to figure out exactly what that is. And so there is a sense of urgency with some of our tenants about what exactly is going to happen. And so that took place at that meeting. But we have had a meeting with Head Start and talked about what the future will be and where we're at currently in our planning stage, and we're going to continue that communication. So
You had meetings after the last Planning Commission meeting?
yes, we had one meeting after the last Planning Commission with the board, with members of the board, our executive administration of the JUHSD, a member of the board of Head Start, and staff from the local Head Start that is a tenant. And then there's been ongoing meetings and discussion between our staff and their staff.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, colleagues. I'm going to reserve my comments and questions till after I hear from the public. What I'd like to do now is open this now to the public. I do have a few cards here, and with my colleagues' permission, I'd like to open it this time for the public hearing. All right, I'm just going to move forward. I'm going to call 3 names. I'm going to mix up the cards, so they'll be in no particular order. So if you were the last one to put your card in, you might be the first one to talk. Well, no, it's the other way around. So here we go. All right, the first 3, and if the second and the third can prepare, I'm going to call Debbie Santiago, Patty Lenahan, and Lee Medvedoff. So, Ms. Santiago, thank you. And Patty Lenahan, you're next, and Lee Medvedoff. Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm Debbie Santiago. I'm with the Washoe Tribe of Nevada, California. And I live across the street at Serramonte Ridge. And it was brought to my attention that this project was taking place. And I don't feel that we did not receive any information. We didn't get a letter. We didn't get anything. And so I went to Daly City and I asked what was going on. And I understand the need for housing for the teachers, everyone. My mother was a teacher due to the school district in San Francisco and in Stockton. And we have been concerned about the gardens. And so I'm asking at this time, was there a letter sent out to the American Indians here, the Ohlone and the Miwoks? So that list was given to me, and I had checked with the elders of these particular tribes, and I've spoken to Anne Marie Sayer, who I asked her permission to say she did not receive a letter about the gardens. We are very concerned about the gardens, and nor were there any contacts to the San Francisco Cultural Center or Intertribal Friendship House in Oakland, or the Santa Cruz and San Jose Cultural Centers to contact our tribes. This has not happened. We are very concerned on what's happening. Since I live across the street, we have been using this garden. The school district informed me, said this was not a community garden. There's a sign that says up there was partnership with the San Mateo Cardiology Department and office there in San Mateo, and I spoke to a Kevin.
Well, go ahead, finish up, ma'am.
Okay. I spoke to Kevin Liu, and they have given fundings for this particular gardens, and they're very upset that there was no plan of action for the future. They're using their trucks, their equipments to put on this garden, which they didn't show on there. There is spaces that looks like grassland. This garden, community garden, is a very small garden. We're concerned about the animals. We're concerned about the indigenous ecology. They all coexist with each other within this area. And to disrupt old and new habitat, that's going to be devastation to Mother Earth. We also looked up under the San Mateo.
Okay, ma'am, you have to finish up for me because we have a lot more folks.
Okay, we also looked under that they're already marking redwood trees there, and under your ordinance, if they're 2 inches in width, they're gonna, you can't cut them down, but they are being marked to be cut down. So we're asking for a plan of action from the school. We're asking a plan of action from the city to please wait before you offer any permits on this particular time, because none of the tribes were consulted.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next person is a Patty Lenahan. Good evening, ma'am. And Lee Medvedoff, you're next.
Okay, I'm Patty Lenahan. I work at Jefferson Union High School District. I'm very nervous. The lot is empty right now, and it brings no revenue to the city at all. It's just an empty parking lot. So it would benefit so many people. I'm not a teacher, but I work there, and I hopefully would benefit from these houses. I'm on lists for low-income housing in Daly City and in South City, but I work so many hours to be able to afford to live here that I won't qualify if I do get in off the wait list that I'm on. So, I mean, it's like a catch-22. I can't afford to live here just on my salary. I have to work more hours and more jobs. It's very expensive to live here. And I know that everybody knows that, and I just think to hold Jefferson Union High School District to a higher standard to take care of everybody else and not their employees isn't fair. So I just implore you to vote yes and let this go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lenahan. All right, Lee Medvedoff.
Hi.
Good evening, sir.
I'm Lee
Before
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you start, next up is a Michael Rodriguez, a Jennifer Pifoletti, and Haley Halloran. Good evening, sir. How do you pronounce your last name?
Medvedoff.
Medvedoff?
Yeah,
Okay.
I am a special education teacher with the Jefferson Union High School District. I work at the district office starting this year as a program specialist, assisting a lot of the new teachers. And as Kalima had shared, you know, we have a lot of turnover, and so it's definitely required this position to be able to be there for many reasons, but in particular assisting new teachers. So I'm very much in support of the housing for staff. I've had very close friends and colleagues who have to live in the East Bay and commute, which that commute is getting longer and longer. It becomes a health concern for these staff members who are also less able to participate, as you had said, in the community here where their students live, which I agree is very important. And they're less able to participate in after-school activities. I myself live on the peninsula. I was able to be a tennis coach for several seasons and connected me to the students in a different way. And I thought that was a really valuable experience for me. And, you know, I was able to help the school. We wouldn't have had a tennis team if I hadn't stepped up to do that. So we have 67 certificated staff members and 23 classified staff members who've expressed interest in moving in to these units. So I definitely think it's important to consider all of the concerns from the community because it does impact people outside of our district. So, you know, we should be conscientious of that and take our time with that. But I think ultimately we have a mandate to do this. So I hope that you will help us get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medvedoff. All right, Mr. Michael Rodriguez. Good evening, sir.
Hello, thank you. I'm here to just say that I'm in favor of the staff housing project. Just to put things in perspective, a new teacher at Jefferson Union High School District will make about $52,000 a year.
How much?
$52,000. So in comparison to South San Francisco, their school district starts off teachers at 60. Within 12 years, JUHSD will pay about 75 in comparison to South SF that pays 85. The income disparity between working at this district compared to working at other districts is anywhere between $10,000 to $15,000, which is a substantial amount of money. You know, as a new teacher, when I first got hired with the school district and came here, for 3 months I had to live in a crash pad. What that is you rent a bed space. I rented a bed space and lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 5 other adults, just because I couldn't find affordable housing for 3 months. So as I was teaching in the classroom, I'm living with housing scarcity. In addition to that, on top of my job as working with the district, I also have to drive Uber for 2 hours every day to make additional income. So just to highlight the need for this project, it's real and it's going to help a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Jennifer Pifaletti. Good evening, ma'am.
Council. My name is Jennifer Pifaletti. I am the Director of Operations for IHSD. We run the Head Start program for the county and specifically the Head Start program in Daly City, which is at the 699 Serramonte Boulevard location. I'm here tonight to express our support for the project that JUHSD is moving forward, and we're here as a partner with the district. As an educational agency ourselves, we absolutely understand that our teachers that make much less than public school teachers, we absolutely understand the pressure that the cost of living puts on teacher retention for the county. And so we applaud and we fully support the project for teacher housing at the site. As you mentioned and you're aware, we did attend the December Planning Commission meeting to express our concern about the communication that happened between our agencies regarding the project. We have had subsequent meetings with the school district after that meeting and realized that there was some missed communication that happened. We have resolved our short-term concerns and we are in the process of planning for long-term for the site for our agencies. And we're just here since we expressed our concern publicly. We want to now express our support publicly as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we have Haley Holloman.
Hello and good evening.
Okay.
I'm right here.
I was writing, I'm sorry. Okay.
My name's Haley Holloman. I am a teacher at Jefferson High School and I teach math, which is exciting. I, like many teachers who are new to our district, come from all over California and other states. And it's an exciting journey to come work out here, teaching, challenging, learning about our kids, and just engaging in that process. But it's also met with a lot of stress, especially when it comes to figuring out how to live and how to afford housing. I came out here and lived in a house that was designed for 4 people with 8 other adults for the first year that I was here. I also, like other people, have worked multiple jobs. I advise clubs, I advise the senior class, and even consider coaching sports just so I can have that time with the kids, but also just have extra income to afford to live. So I am in favor of the housing. Also, 5,724 residents and citizens of Daly City are in favor of the housing, and the majority of 14,492 voters of the Jefferson Union High School District said yes to this project. Thank you.
Holloman. All right, next we have a Marlene Gutierrez. Marlene Gutierrez. While you're working your way up, Ms. Gutierrez, next I have Elgar Santiago. Okay, and Debbie Santiago, same address. Debbie? Oh, okay. Eric Campbell. Okay, you're ready to start making your way up, sir, all right? Okay, ma'am, thank you so much for being here.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you about the need to have staff housing for Jefferson Union High School District. So I'm Marlene Gutierrez. I'm a science teacher at Terra Nova High School. This is my 20th year at Terra Nova High School, and you might ask why I'm not a homeowner. Like most of the 10% of Filipinos who left the country, I'm here, I left my country, my home country, for financial reasons. So I had other priorities. I have to help my family back home, and when I thought I was ready to purchase a house, I just couldn't afford it anymore. So right now, more than 40%, close of 40% of my net monthly pay goes to rent. And just think about this. I'm already one of the senior teachers in the district, so my pay rate is already in the highest scale. So I could just imagine how, and I'm still struggling, and I could just imagine how the younger teachers are doing. I'm also a department head, so for the last 3 or 4 years, it has been a struggle to find science teachers in my school. I mean, we get a lot of applicants, but then once they realize how much we can offer them and where they have to live, then they start thinking about going somewhere else, or they actually go somewhere else. And at the same time, for those who decided that they would try it for a year, then we train them, and then after a year, they go to other districts who could pay more. So I'm here, so I just want to reiterate, I'm already one of the highest paid teachers, but I'm a renter. So just imagine the rest of the younger teachers who are struggling. So thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Excuse me. Okay, Edgar Santiago. Elgar.
No, it's Edgar.
Oh, it is Edgar. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm here for this project. I don't want to take away from this particular project, but the main concern that I'm here for is the community garden. It's been there for over 20 years, and they're wanting to use that as a staging ground, just to tear it down, just to put their stuff there. Like, can they put it in a different area? Because that has a whole ecosystem there. We have plants there. I take care of all 25 plants there, and there's 25 plants of one area, and there's like a whole garden. We got chicken coops there. We have 4 chickens. We have a rooster. We have 2 cats that live there. They live on the thing. We come there and feed them every day. We come there and just take care of them and it's like a really personal thing, especially for me. I've been having a lot of health issues, and that is really helping me like go there, and I've been eating stuff from the garden, like the vegetables and everything, and just doing the garden and the activity there. For them to remove it just to put it as a staging ground, I feel like that's not right. And they also have the redwood trees there and stuff, and just to see that cut down, and they say they want to bring it back later. But it's already there. Why? That's not something it's not like a building you tear down and you bring back up. It's an area, and I don't want to take away from the teachers wanting to move there and have the housing. That's great and all and stuff, but the fact of the matter is that community garden that's there. And Phil couldn't be here, the main guy that's been helping run that, but we're here to support him and stuff because he's been feeling like he's almost lost it. So I'm here to say that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Santiago. Okay, Mr. Eric Campbell. Good evening, sir.
How you guys all doing? All right, I'm Eric Campbell. I'm here representing the garden as well. And if we could save the garden, that would be great. But my main concern is the heritage trees that are on the property. And I thought, San Mateo County passed all these rules within the last few years to help protect these type of things. And these guys went through this last week and spray painted over 24 heritage trees, redwood trees, that they're going to get paid to go there to cut them down and go and take the tree stumps themselves and make probably $100,000. They're worth that much. And I don't know, I thought we passed these laws to be able to save these type of things, I'm not against the schools, the teachers or anything. I'm just here trying to be looking out for the environment, and that, maybe someone should take a look and go and make sure these guys aren't trying to just go and make a huge profit by going and destroying something that has taken over 20-something years to do. So that's all. That's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next 3 is Alex Melendrez, a Richard Beltran, and a Monica Casey. So, Mr. Melendrez. Where are you? There you are. There. How you doing, Alex?
Good evening, Honorable Daly City Council and City staff. My name is Alex Melendres, and I'm representing the Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County, or HLC. We are a nonprofit dedicated to working with communities and their leaders to produce and preserve quality, affordable homes. I had some prepared comments, but I just want to say I was pretty moved by some of the stories I heard tonight from our faculties, from our educators. It really does highlight how urgent the need for affordable housing is, especially for our educators and staff. I'm here in support of the Jefferson Union High School District's proposed faculty and staff housing. This proposal is a unique opportunity for the district and the city of Daly City to provide a high number of deeply affordable homes for the district's workers who could not normally be able to afford market rate homes or market rate rents, as you've heard tonight. These 122 affordable homes will benefit the future of our children by providing educators and the staff that support them a safe and quality affordable space to call home and a place for them to rest their head at night. HLC would like to urge the Daly City Council to support the Jefferson Union High School District's faculty and staff housing proposal in any needed capacity without delay. Help us care for those who provide for our children, and thank you very much for your leadership tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Melendres. All right, Mr. Richard Beltran.
Hello. Hi, my name is Richie Beltran.
Good evening, sir.
I'm a descendant of the Tignic tribe in Pacifica, Ramaytush people of the Bay Area. There's very few of us that are left here. I want to acknowledge, the teachers. I have the utmost respect for teachers and the job they do. It's a very essential job and what they do for our children. And they're definitely underpaid and definitely not treated in the way that they should. And I'm very thankful for them. I want to honor that. I have concerns about the garden and about, the lack of environmental impact. The lack of our tribes being notified. I've heard that they've been notified, but the people that we've talked to, everybody that we know, nobody has seen anything. Nobody's been, which makes me concerned about the cultural impacts too. We're constantly trying to protect our burial grounds and different things. Not saying that that's a burial ground there, but production, in our territory has wiped out hundreds and hundreds of our burial grounds, of our shell mounds. A lot of your on-ramps to freeways, our ancestors are buried in them. A lot of the roads you drive on, our ancestors are buried in them. So just concerned about this being rushed through like that. I don't understand. I'm trying to understand why they can't maybe find another place or find a way to work the project where they can build part of it and use part of it for storage while they build half of it. I've done that. I work in construction too, and often they do stuff like that. They find creative ways to create storage so they don't have to wipe out ecosystems like this. And so once again, concerned about the environmental impact and the lack of studies there and the lack of studies of cultural impact. I don't know if there's any cultural significance there from our ancestors there. Cultural that has not been looked into, as if the tribes have not been contacted properly. So I've seen this kind of thing happen more than once, and where they go through and they just do things, too fast, and they don't take the time. So I want to make sure that that's being done. I'm concerned about this, them wiping out all those trees and the animals. There's critters that'll live in there. There's a whole ecosystem there, and they say they're going to restore it back, but how do you restore life back after you've disturbed it? Only Creator can do that. So I'm just really concerned about that. There needs to be more studies done on this. And I'm going to keep looking into this further and find out what studies have been done. And I'm going to stay vocal on this. And I'm going to let other people in the Native community know and be vocal on this. So please take the time and notify I've got a family here that lives there that have not been notified. So we need to make sure that we're notifying people and let them know what's going on and really, really do the environmental impact and the cultural impact. I want to see that. Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. All right, the last card I have is Monica Casey.
Hi.
Good evening.
Hello, my name is Monica Casey. I'm the president of AFT 1481, which is the union that represents not just the teachers, but all staff members. I want to reiterate that this is for teachers and staff. And one of the things I want to bring up is we have a lot of staff that support the teachers and support the students. And they are having a really hard time finding housing to afford. This would be half of market rate, which would be really helpful. So we're intending on not just teachers, but also staff to be included here. A lot of our, for example, Patty, who was here earlier, she's a van driver, and she does several jobs in the district. So oftentimes we can't find enough bus drivers, so they have to do double shifts, triple shifts to get all the kids where they need to be. So I just want to make sure you hear that it is staff, not just teacher housing. And all of us in the district are having issues with housing. That doesn't mean we don't want the environment to be taken care of, but I do believe that a lot of the studies have been done, and we need to move forward on this. And this is something that the voters voted for, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Casey. All right, I have no more cards. I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
Motion to close hearing?
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Any additional comments will not be entertained at this time. Before I make my final comment, and I said I would listen first to the public and gain some questions that I can perhaps ask of staff and or the applicant. Hearing you, this is to the applicant. When I saw your rendition up on the screen, staff, I see that there was a daycare portion of the building. I saw something that says daycare and community room.
It says daycare. It's not a daycare. It's just a room for children to play where, it could be indoors, not always outside. It's right next to a laundry room, so if somebody's doing laundry, they can have their children play in there, but it's not a daycare.
All right, thank you.
Also, I'm getting in my squats.
Tonight I heard some additional information. Have any studies been done to check to see if this is protected land?
So we're not doing anything in the garden. We had initially looked at staging in the garden, but since it was not part of the EIR report, we're told we can't do anything to that piece of land. So we're not staging in the garden at all. Our staging is happening in another site. Nothing is happening to the garden in relation to workforce housing. We will be looking at that in the future for future development, but for this project right now, the garden is being held harmless.
Thank you for your verification and validation. Okay, that's all I have right now. Before I make a final comment, now I'll open it up to my council members based upon additional information you all have heard. If you have any additional questions or concerns for either staff or the applicant. Anybody?
Go ahead, Ben.
I'll start at the right, Ms. Di Giovanni.
Thank you, Mayor. Based on that particular comments as well, I don't want to make you keep coming up and down, or maybe our staff knows about the heritage trees. What is the ordinance, and so many inches apart for the redwood trees?
The city does not have a tree ordinance, so.
But the county, yeah.
Go ahead. The San Mateo County ordinance is not a part of our jurisdiction. We don't have, it's not the same regulations that we have to adhere to. The city of Daly City specifically does not have anything regarding regulation of trees, heritage or significant sized trees.
We don't?
Not on
So that
private
means
property.
that they can cut down heritage trees?
So based on my understanding, there's specific definitions for heritage trees depending on the size. Various jurisdictions have their own definitions of it, and since we haven't defined one, we technically don't have a definition for heritage tree, but regardless of size, they are able to cut down the tree if it's not associated with a project.
So in this particular project, were trees to be subjected to be cut down?
There are trees that will be cut down to allow for the proposed building.
And do those trees match the ordinance of San Mateo County as heritage trees?
Staff has not looked into that particularly because we do not adhere to those regulations. Those are San Mateo County specific, not specific to City of Daly City.
All right, any other council members have any questions? All right, now final comments. Any final comments for staff or the applicant? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to, I think there was clarification on the community gardens, but moving forward in any of the developments on the larger kind of master plan of the site, I think it would be helpful to have communication with the indigenous community and ensuring that they are apprised of what's going on. That would be something moving forward. I know you're not moving in that particular master plan yet, and it's just a staff housing, but just to have that communication. And then also, the question I do have is, I know it's the district's land, but how many trees in total are being affected? And just to know.
I can find the exact number in a few minutes, but I believe it's dozens. It's not just less than 10 or a nominal amount.
Oh, it's like 2 dozen?
I'll take a look at what the exact number is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, Dr. Rod, Mr. Buenaventura?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. I've listened this evening to both sides, and I think it's time to, I always believe a confused mind always says no, and full transparency is the key. I've had the opportunity within the past week to meet with members of the Jefferson Union School District. I've had the opportunity to review the Planning Commission when this matter was brought before the Planning Commission. And this is what I learned. Originally, they were going to build 48 units. And is that enough? They took the time, and then they says, let's build 60 units. Was that enough? They conducted a survey, and over 100 folks responded to the survey, and now we stand at 122. The other issue was, and I'm kind of jumping all over the place, Dr. Rod, you had made mention about the traffic impact. Do you know if most of those teachers live on site, maybe it might reduce traffic a little bit? So that's another thought that I have. To Ms. Casey, you brought up a very good question, which I had also asked that question. Who is this going to be for, and what sort of fairness and equity is going to be provided? Is it just the teachers? And from what I've been told, it's certificated staff. That can include the engineer, the custodian, basically folks who work for the school district. I can't find anything that's negative about this project. Ms. Salahuddin, you've answered the question also. We also heard about Head Start. And also hearing from, I think it was Poletti, you still here? I think the representative from Head Start, it made me feel so comfortable to know that even you, amidst the miscommunications, agree with this project. And the feeling that I got in meeting with some of the school district personnel, the school district personnel cares about its students. It cares about other folks who utilizes the premises. And I walked away with a feeling you're not going to be left in the cold. So I had a little note here, 20 years as a resident and head of the district, the science, we need to give this opportunity to help our teachers. They definitely need it. And we all voted for this. I'm paying taxes, and I want to see my money at work. We need this, folks. So that's my feeling. Just as long as we ensure full and complete transparency, if there are questions and concerns from the public, especially those who might be affected, you need to give them that information and not leave them left out, as Vice Mayor alluded. Ms. Morales, did you have an update on the trees?
I did. Thank you for your patience.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Manalo, the number of trees that will be removed is approximately 90 trees, and doesn't specify what size, so it could be as small as a couple of inches or as large as 36 inches wide. But they do plan on planting approximately 87 trees.
Great, thank you. So in essence, they'll be planting 87 in the total project. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Morales. Let's see, community gardens, heritage trees, tribe. That's all I have at this time for comments. So what I like to do at this time is, hearing nothing else, like to continue this matter and take a vote. I'm sorry.
Adopt the resolution.
Oh. Okay. That's what you get when you try to go by memory. Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, so I'd like to make a motion for the city attorney to read by title only.
Is that the motion?
That's my motion, yes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, so first and second, Madam City Attorney.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Daly City amending Daly City zoning map by amending ordinance number 1048 to Plan Development Zone PD 71A and establishing plan development standards.
All right, do we have a council member who would like to introduce the ordinance? Dr. Rod? Since you're an educator, I would recommend that you do. I saw Dr. Rod nod his head because, he deals with this as well, and he knows. Dr. Rod.
I'd like to make a motion to introduce the Jefferson Union High School District Faculty and Staff Housing Project.
Thank you, Dr. Rod. All right, so now we'll adopt the resolution, but that can only be adopted by roll call. So may I have a roll call, please?
Is there a motion?
Oh,
a resolution. That's different. So a motion for the resolution?
Adopt the resolution by roll call.
Okay.
No, yeah.
Okay.
That's the motion.
Okay.
Okay, so we need a second.
Second.
We have a second. Roll call, please. Thank you, Madam City Attorney.
Thank you. Ms. DiGiovanni?
Aye.
Ms. Manalo?
Aye.
Dr. Rod?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura?
Aye.
Mr. Sylvester?
Aye. Great job. Thank you so much. All right, the next item on the agenda is item number 11. This is the adoption of short-term rental fees. It's an introduction of an ordinance to adding to Chapter 5.92 to the Daly City Municipal Code. And once again, we have Ms. Morales, and we'll give a few moments for audience to clear. Oh, I have cards on them. Yep, I got STR right here. You're kidding.
Not kidding.
This too? Ms. Fuller? Yes? Was yours on a general matter, or was it on this particular one? Because it's not marked here. Oh, okay, thank you. All right, absolutely. All right. I'm sure Mr. Buenaventura will be walking back in momentarily, so we'll keep the meeting going. He should have the material. Ms. Morales, you have the floor. Welcome back.
Thank you. So I will be proposing the proposed short-term rental ordinance and fees. So I'm sure many of you have seen the presentation before. I've added some changes regarding what has been added since the last meeting on November 25th, but I'll just go over a brief overview of what occurred during the development process, as well as what short-term rentals mean generally in Daly City. Just to start off, to define a short-term rental, it is defined as a home or individual rooms within a home that is rented to an individual for a period of 30 days or less. So the proposed ordinance would not affect long-term rentals. So any consecutive stay of more than 30 days would not be affected by this ordinance. And as of January 3rd, there were 549 short-term rental units identified in Daly City, and a total of 788 active listings on various platforms such as Airbnb, etc. In April 2018, the City Council convened a task force consisting of residents, including a short-term rental host and other representatives. And the recommendations from the task force meeting were to require owner occupancy, prohibit short-term rentals on properties with accessory dwelling units, and limiting the number of days a homeowner can use their home as a short-term rental. This is just a brief summary of what has occurred since the study session in March 2019. There have been a couple of meetings since then where we have received public input, and City Council has directed staff to make revisions to the ordinance. There was one occurrence where it had to be continued due to another item on the agenda, and the most current ordinance is what is being presented today. Briefly, the ordinance development process, we did retain the services of a consultant to help us with data collection services and more so just advise us to how we should approach the writing of the ordinance. We gathered feedback based on other cities. We spoke to Airbnb to discuss voluntary collection agreements. And to notify the public, we have identified short-term rental hosts and other interested parties and sent them courtesy notices, as well as informing the public through online channels and social media. So this is just a summary of the public comments that we've received. They've all generally been the same, both benefits and concerns. For example, the tenants of these short-term rentals will contribute to the Daly City's economy. It is supplemental income for owners and tenants. And some concerns that were highlighted were a lot of long-term rentals are being converted to short-term rentals. We're seeing a lot of hotels and hostels in residential neighborhoods, and generally there's just increased safety concerns. And many of the public comments included recommendations such as eliminating the owner occupancy requirement entirely. Some have requested that we keep it. Some have recommended that we increase the day limit. Some have even recommended a grandfather clause for existing short-term rentals. And several others have just approved of the ordinance as it was written. This is just highlighting the objectives of the ordinance. This has not changed since the first draft. We seek to preserve and protect neighborhood character, for example, and protect affordable housing units. So in the next several slides, I have broken down how the ordinance is structured, and it's based off of many of the concerns that were included in the public input that we received, as well as when the change was made, and if it's changed since the last draft. So the eligibility of hosts, as of the second draft of the ordinance, we have modified it to allow both owners and tenants. After doing so much research, we noticed that many cities do allow both. It's definitely enforceable, and we will still hold the tenant and host accountable for any nuisances. For eligible units and properties, since the second draft, since we have removed the owner occupancy requirement, we've included duplexes and properties with multiple rental units. But for owner-occupied properties with multiple rental units, so for example, if an owner lived on one out of the 4 units on a property, we would require that the owner only be able to host in their residence. They are still not allowed in inclusionary housing or on properties with accessory dwelling units. And we wanted to clarify, or staff wanted to clarify that the ordinance does not invalidate or supersede any provisions regarding home sharing if it's outlined in a homeowners or condominium association regulations. As for ineligible units and properties, I believe I had the bullet point again, but just to reiterate, no inclusionary housing or properties with ADUs. And I'm sorry, this slide is probably not supposed to be here. So for the primary residency requirement, that has not changed. We will still require that the host reside in the dwelling unit for a minimum of 9 months. This directly corresponds with the unhosted stay limit, which I'll go over in the next few slides. The next slide. So this has not changed since the first draft of the ordinance. Unhosted stays, which means the host is off-site during the guest stay, is limited to a total of 90 days per year. As for hosted stays where the host is on-site during the guest stay, for example, in the next room or they're just renting out 1 bedroom in the home, there would be no limit. For the number of bookings per day, this requirement has not changed. You are only allowed to have 1 booking per stay per day. And just to clarify in the ordinance, the booking can consist of a short-term rental of 1 or more bedrooms or the short-term rental of the entire home. And to further clarify, a short-term rental can be in operation in conjunction with a long-term rental. So for example, you can short-term rent 1 bedroom in your home and then have a long-term occupant in another bedroom. Regarding parking, this has also not changed. In theory, the ordinance would limit the number of days, guests, and bookings on a property, which may help the parking issues that Daly City residents are facing. So no additional parking is required for short-term rentals, but we do require that the existing on-site parking spaces are available for guests. For the short-term rental permit and business license, this hasn't changed since the first draft. We will still require a host to obtain a short-term rental permit, also to obtain a business license and to pay transient occupancy taxes. Both permits will expire every September 30th of each year and require renewal. And if it is a tenant-operated short-term rental, then a notarized authorization form from the owner would be required. There was a provision in the most recent drafts of the ordinance regarding short-term rental insurance. After discussion with the city attorney, we determined it was not necessary, so this has been removed from the proposed ordinance. Regarding enforcement, this also has not changed since the first draft of the ordinance. Failure to comply with any provision of the ordinance could lead to potential ineligibility for renewal. The city has the discretion to suspend a short-term rental if a property has 1 or more violations. And lastly, there is a 3-strike rule. The property will become automatically ineligible if they have 3 violations. Regarding the amnesty period, there was a recommendation regarding a grandfather clause, and after discussion with our consultant and staff, we recommend that there be no grandfather clause because we're allowing for an amnesty period. That would be several months from the effective date to September 30th of this year. As for the local coastal program amendment, we were notified by the California Coastal Commission that a local coastal program amendment would be required to enforce this ordinance on properties within the coastal zone. So staff will be applying for that amendment upon approval of this ordinance. Regarding the revised fees, specifically in the last meeting, there were there were a lot of comments regarding how much we would be charging for the permit, as well as, or in general, how much we'd be charging for the short-term rental permit. The originally proposed fees only accounted for staff time. So after meeting with our consultant, we have revised the fees to now include estimated costs for software and contractual services, which will help staff with compliance and monitoring of the short-term rental. So for example, it will help us identify short-term rental units, send out letters to those that are out of compliance, and that was estimated to be approximately $60 per short-term rental listing per year. And for the business license fee, it has remained the same. And I have a summary here of the proposed change. So it's a pretty equal, transparent pricing. It's $165 for the planning staff hour, and then in addition to the $60, it comes out to $225 for the short-term rental permit fee, half for the renewal, and then depending on if it exceeds 1 hour, it might incur additional costs. And the business license fee remains a minimum of $110. As for the environmental assessment, it is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. And this slide and the next slide just outlines our findings, which are also in the staff report. Well, the last slide was just showing the recommendations for City Council to introduce the ordinance. I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Morales. Okay, council members, any additional questions for Ms. Morales? Hearing none, I'd like to open it up to public. I'd like to open the hearing to public comments. I need a second on that.
If I may,
Yes.
this item already had public comment, but you are welcome to take comment, but the public hearing has been closed in the prior hearing.
Oh.
But you can take comments, just to take the comments. It doesn't have to be a public hearing, it's procedural.
All right, so we're going to take comments at this time. All right, we have quite a few cards, so please be cognizant of the time, please. The first three folks to speak will be Ms. Stella Stark, Rochelle Nawakabin, okay, and the author Shakeman. So Ms. Stella Stark, please. Come up. Thank you.
Hello, Councilman.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Okay.
My name is Stella Stark. Thanks for having me.
I remember you.
I just want to say I do admire the City Council for creating this task force and doing a lot of research when it comes to the short-term rentals in Daly City. I just wanted to point out that there's kind of a unique opportunity here in Daly City. There's a lot of passionate hosts who have done a really good job with their short-term rentals, and I think there's a great way where the hosts and the city can kind of work together to make this ordinance work for everybody. I encourage you to not pass this particular ordinance because I think with more hosts on the task force, there can be a great middle ground, and there's a way where the hosts want to support the city earning income on the TOT taxes, and we want to, make sure we're doing this correctly with our business licenses and things like that. And we'd even be willing to make some kind of code of conduct to make sure that hosts are meeting regularly, to make sure that everybody is being good hosts and sharing information, and we want to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods because Daly City is such a unique place. And for the ordinance, the way it sits now, where the host has to be there 24/7 doesn't necessarily help with a lot of the people who are interested in visiting Daly City, whether it's families who want to come in and they need access to all the bedrooms and the backyards and things like that. We want to make sure that those people are encouraged to come to Daly City and see, you don't have to go to San Francisco to have the Bay Area experience. There's a lot of small businesses you can support here and have a unique experience in the Bay Area. That's everything I have to say. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll get the first name, right? Rochelle Fortier. Good evening, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, council members, mayor, Mr. Mayor. My name is Rochelle Fortier Wadivia, for those of you who don't remember. But, it's just not lost on us that today we opened this meeting establishing a small business commission where we're celebrating small businesses. And the Airbnb hosts are in fact small business. So what we're doing in the same meeting is both celebrating and attempting to punish small businesses. And so I just wanted to bring that full circle. As we sat here, we were just sort of, looking at this as, boy, wow, this, we're not getting the support that we really think that we deserve. And I just wanted to ask everyone that's here for this subject to please stand or to wave your hand if you're here because of this. So, I would recommend or suggest to the council that since we're establishing a small business commission, which I just learned tonight, that it might be a good idea to table this and put it over and let this small business commission tackle this in conjunction with the members of the community and to get a result that everybody can support. So my comments about this ordinance are follows. First of all, I still believe that this ordinance is arbitrary. You're allowing one short-term rental and then you're not allowing two. This to me is really arbitrary. I don't know that there's any evidence that shows that having two rentals where you have a host that's present is going to cause more harm than if you only have one. So, I think is one thing. And another thing I've said before is that this is overbroad. It's not narrowly tailored, and nor is it, in my estimation, evidence-based. And on top of that, it's even vague. But remember that you're literally taking money out of the pockets of your own residents. And these residents include seniors, many of whom are on fixed incomes. And I just don't think that's a really good one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fortier. All right, Arthur Shakeman.
That's me.
And next, hold on, Mr. Shakeman. C. Angelico and a Linda Littenheiser and a Sharon Howell. Okay, sir.
Thank you.
No comment? Angelico? Oh, you sure? Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Sir.
Thank you. I didn't realize that today wasn't a hearing, but instead more of a public comment. So thank you. I appreciate you guys listening to what we have to say either way. This is my third time speaking here, and overall I wanted to say thank you guys for even listening to us. And thank you, Ms. Morales, for working so hard on this. I know that you've been changing a lot of things. I've been following very, very closely. One thing that I still have yet to hear is a good reason as to why there should be only a maximum of 90 days for unhosted stays. We've talked about a lot of things here, but that's one topic that keeps getting brought up. I keep addressing it every time I speak here, but it is not clear to me still why you guys, or why the city is against, or why it hasn't been brought up as to why limit unhosted stay in general. There are roughly 32,500 units in Daly City, and you mentioned that there are 550 short-term rentals. That's only 1.7% of the housing. That's a drop in the bucket. We touched on small businesses tonight, which I didn't know was on the agenda, but it actually, like the young lady said, is very much in line with what we're doing. at the end of the day, we are providing housing, and providing housing is a business. Last time, my neighbor, Tim, spoke about fees and taxes associated with property management and how they're more than short-term rental fees. I think that's unfair. I agree with him. The fees that we pay should be no different than the fees that they pay. The mayor today said that there's nothing negative about the project for building housing for teachers. I completely agree with that. And I think that there's absolutely nothing negative about short-term rentals. And lastly, well, actually, that was the last thing. Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you, Mr. Shakeman. Miss Linda Lichtenheiser? Good evening, ma'am.
Hello. It's Lighthizer. Thank you very much. This is my third time coming before the council, and I've written a number of emails, and I thank your staff for being so prompt to answer and has let me have a say. However, the problem is that I don't live in Daly City. I support Daly City. I am a small business. My husband and I live just over the border in San Francisco, and we have deep family connections to Daly City. We are a small business. We support the small businesses in the city. We send our guests all over Daly City to shop, to eat. And so in that sense, we feel like we are contributing a lot. We agree, we love to be part of the Small Business Council. We feel we have a lot to offer. We've been doing this for 7 years. We are super hosts. And you earn that by being a quality business, by having people come and stay with you that can give you the support. And they grade you how well their stay was. They love coming to Daly City. I want to continue to do this. But if there isn't some kind of a carve-out for non-residents that could possibly be a limited number or some sort of attrition factor, allowing the current host to continue hosting. But we have all kinds of ideas like this. What this process has done is unite the host community. We didn't know each other before this process started. And what it did was brought us together to talk about our similarities and ways we can help the city get a great ordinance. So I would like you to consider putting a pause on this legislation, getting more input from hosts. One person, it sounds like, was a host who helped contribute to this. We don't know what their circumstances were. We would urge you to give this more time and let us help you. Thank you.
All right, the next person I have is Sharon Howell, and I will call 3 other names to be ready. Joe Lichtenheiser. Okay. Benjamin Butler and Rich Prince. Okay.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Sharon Howell, and good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I appreciate you taking the extra public notices today. I appreciate that. So I appreciate the thoroughness of this ordinance. Honestly, I do. And I submitted a written comment, so tonight I just wanted to share a little bit of my written comment with the public. We have been a homeowner in Daly City for 26 years, and we raised 3 children in the Westlake Northwest neighborhood. Short-term renters do not have the same commitment or investment in our communities. That's a guarantee. Long-term renters, on the other hand, are an important part of our community and are a completely separate topic of discussion. I appreciate your slide because I did my own research. On January 7th, online short-term rentals in Daly City had approximately 618 listings in HomeToGo.com. A number of these listings advertise up to at least 16 guests in one property. VRBO for the area of west of Skyline Boulevard between John Daly Boulevard and the Longview Park area, it indicated 14 listings for the weekend of February 14th through February 17th. 14 listings in that one neighborhood alone. A number of these listings advertised at least up to 16 guests in one property. Airbnb revealed at least 11 similar listings. One listing with HomeAway.com, which is up the hill from my house, this listing, revealed it had an advertise of home with 7 bedrooms, which could accommodate up to 22 guests in one property. I appreciate the ordinance. I think it's thorough and comprehensive, but I have concerns. Will there be monitoring of geographical locations to prevent too many in one neighborhood or on one street? Are the remodeled homes applying for permits, eliminating the conversion of garages and living spaces into numerous bedrooms, such as the house I mentioned?
Okay, ma'am, you're going to have to finish up for me, please.
Okay, very quickly.
Okay.
How are you going to monitor the difference between an unhosted home and a hosted home? How will you address the increase in the wastewater and the water usage in these neighborhoods? How will you address the street parking when all of the off-street parking has been eliminated? And what about the water runoff when the homes all pave over the front yards?
Okay, ma'am, I have to thank you very much. There's
Okay.
other folks, and it's been over time.
Thank you. Thank you for
so much
taking
for
additional comments.
All right. All right, Mr. Joe Littenhiser. Did I say that right this time around?
Actually, it's Lightheiser.
It's what, Lighthouser?
Lightheiser. It's like a regular Heiser, but
Lightheiser,
fewer
like Bud
calories.
Light, Heiser. Well, you spell like Bud, okay. Thank you, got you, sir.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. So again, my name is Joe Lightheiser, and my wife, who you heard just a while ago, and I host and have hosted a house in Westlake area since 2011. I spoke to you in October with more of the details, but basically in that period of time we've hosted we've had 200 bookings from all over the world, and we have several pending now. Following the October council meeting, we submitted comments that began by addressing the stated objectives of the ordinance, which Ms. Morales has gone over again today. So just let me say 2 things. I won't repeat what I said in October, what I wrote to you, but with regard to additional revenue, I don't know how that all balance sheet all works out, but you're clearly going to lose some listings and gain some, perhaps. I don't know how it really, if you get in that, if you start getting people off the network, then you're going to lose the fees and the TOTs. I don't know what the net is. But more importantly, I think with regard to quality of life issues, a lot of the abuses that we just heard are already addressed in the ordinance, I think. And any host, any sensible host who wants to continue doing this already takes care of that. It's just crazy. With 5,000 words of written comment and 2 appearances here since October, I am left with this. The remaining requirement of primary owner or long-term tenant occupancy may well force us in particular to end the use of our Daly City House as a short-term rental unit. Just will. If that is the result, the goals of the ordinance would, in my opinion, be better realized by allowing us to continue as before with the addition of a TOT assessment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Lighthouser. Okay, Mr. Benjamin Butler. Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Hello. First, I want to thank you all for the work you've done so far. And I've been here since the 70s, and I think you sitting here right now, it has to be historic, because I don't remember this picture of it before, but you know what I mean. Okay, so when I discuss this law, I mean, I have it all here. I read every page. I wish in these proceedings that they would actually read all these provisions, because unfortunately it fails to meet the four goals that it hopes to achieve. The non-conversion to from long-term to short-term housing, it doesn't do that. It doesn't preserve affordable housing. That's not even an issue here. It does nothing for the neighborhood character. And it hopes to generate revenue by providing alternate housing, but it's so restrictive it won't do that. It'll put me out of business. This law was written with the consultation of a company called Host Compliance, which also seeks to provide enforcement services for this law that they basically wrote. Now, some might call this a conflict of interest. I mean, they consulted, and here they're going to do an enforcement too, it appears. Some say they specialize in taking homeowners' rights away. I mean, I looked at the website, and you can see it for yourself. In any event, I urge you to vote no for this, or postpone the vote and reconvene a new task force. You can see you have a lot of expertise here. I'm also a superhost, and I have a short-term rental in San Francisco also, so I'm very familiar with the laws in various states. My house in Daly City is valued at $1.3 million. I'm not going to have 16 or 22 people, or whatever the woman was saying before. Who would do that? I think that you should allow us to have a more diverse group who's going to decide this, because the law doesn't go into effect till October 2020 anyway, so we have time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, Mr. Rich Prince. Good evening, sir. After Mr. Prince, we'll have Mr. John Pfister, a Tim Cannon, and a Carol. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and our council members. I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. As the city attorney pointed out, you didn't really need to. But I also wanted to praise you to begin with, because I've been attending city council meetings and I hear how well Daly City is doing. You guys, through your efforts, have pulled Daly City into the black. You're a $100 million enterprise plus. You have made real accomplishments for this city. I think that your efforts in small business are phenomenal, and we all see ourselves as small business owners. To the individuals who mentioned that they didn't want to see listings with 14, 15, 16, or 17 people, I can tell you now, we don't either. We don't want to see that. It's ridiculous. It causes conflict with our neighbors. We want to have this particular ordinance done right, with our input, with the input of other people, with the additional input of the people who were on there beforehand. We value their contribution, and we value your attention to this matter before it gets out of hand, like someplace like Paris, France, that has 60,000 units. That's not going to happen here. And we, as a group, know that we can work with you and together to help make it reasonable, so that we can change parts of this ordinance, and at the same time make sure that the people who have invested money in this, who've achieved superhost status, who are involved now as a community that you help bring together, can make sure this is positive going forward. And we want to work with you. We really do. So I thank you once again for your time and your attention and your valiant work. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. Okay, Mr. John Pfister. Good evening, sir.
Hi, I'm John Pfister. I'm actually have never spoken in front of a committee like this before, but I felt this matter was really important. I am a superhost. I've been a superhost for 3 years, and I think the way that this ordinance is written is so restrictive that it wouldn't allow me to host at all. And when I look at the things that are supposedly the negatives of Airbnb presence in these neighborhoods, people talking about way too many people and the trash and the parking, these are misuse of the size of the house. This is something that should be enforced in an appropriate way for the size of the dwelling. So I, like all the other hosts I've heard speak, we take measures to enforce that our guests are abiding by rules and regulations that we as hosts even provide, like no partying, keeping noise levels down, and using our own provided parking spaces. So I think that it's like really confusing to me how this is so restrictive that we wouldn't be able to host it all. So I think one other thing I want to point out is that in order to get my house ready for renting, I did a lot of renovation to it. I put a lot of money into it and I upgraded the house. It's in a nicer condition than most of my neighbors. And as the guests churn through the house, I'm able to see the house after every guest and do maintenance as needed. I never go like 2 years without ever seeing the inside of the house where some major problem could have happened. So I'm always able to get in and fix problems. And I think we're ultimately just the small businesses that we mean to support, and we're supporting the local businesses as well by driving traffic into the local businesses. So I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, sir, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, can we, no, you're fine, Mr. Fitzer. We take a short recess at this particular time, please. Give us about 3 minutes. 3 minutes, and we'll resume, okay?
Good call, Mayor.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience, and we will resume the meeting. Okay. Mr. Fitzer, we heard from Mr. Fitzer?
Yeah, that was me.
You were the last one?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thought so. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Cannon, I see you there. All right. Then we have a Carol and a Lei Shin. Good evening, Mr. Cannon.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I want to thank the staff for all the hard work that went into this. I was involved in the process early on. I can support this ordinance as a compromise. You had a long hearing with the Jefferson Union High School District that made it very clear how short housing is in Daly City. My position still is for every Airbnb, we're taking a house out of the housing stock. If you play this forward some period of time, I live in Southern Hills, a small area. We have a school up there called Panorama, which is part of the Brisbane School District. The attendance is dropping because we just don't have that many kids in the neighborhood anymore. So if Airbnb keeps growing, what's going to happen to our school districts? What's going to happen to our neighborhoods? What's going to happen to our churches? What's going to happen to all these things that a city makes a city healthy? We're going to become one giant rental. We're going to be a big hotel. When I bought up in Southern Hills, I bought a house, and I was surrounded by other neighbors like myself that had kids or didn't have kids, but we had a community. We had a neighborhood community. And as this grows, where we have people, there's nothing wrong with the people that rent these houses. They're very nice people. But as things grow, there's an Airbnb next door to me. Every once in a while, I'll say, hi, how you doing? You'll have a short conversation. Sometimes you say, hi, how you doing? And fine, jump in their car and leave. There's no neighborhood there. There's no sense of community there. We're sabotaging our city by selling out to people that want to make money on a house. If you want to have a hotel, we have spaces on Universal where you can build a hotel. So but I can work with this ordinance the way it is. It's a compromise. It works in San Francisco, works in other areas, so it'll be here. But I still think every time we have an Airbnb, we're taking a piece of property out of the housing stock. And in my business, I see 2 and 3 generations renting houses. That's the only way the families can afford to live close to a job, is to live together. And I know myself, I really wouldn't be too crazy about living with my grandchildren, but if I had to, I would. And that's what's happening.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon.
Thank you.
Okay, Corral. And then we have a Lei Shin afterwards. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, and City Council. And just want to, I'm terrified of public speaking, but I came because of my kids. Thank you for your time and for allowing me to share my story with you. Well, first of all, I want to say I do support the TOT. I think it is a great idea, and the city will get a lot of revenue from it if hosts are allowed to continue hosting. But so about my story, so my husband Kevin and I bought our little house in Westlake in 1992. That was like 28 years ago. We lived there for about 6 years, and we had, while we were there, we had a baby there as well while we were living in the house. In 1998, we moved closer to our jobs in the East Bay. So we had this house in Daly City. We rented it out to long-term tenants. So for 20 years, from 1998 to 2017, it was occupied by different long-term tenants. We had very bad experience with most of our long-term tenants. The rent was pretty cheap, but nobody, we gave them a good house every time, but nobody took any good care of the house. Every time we got the house back, it was a mess, and we had to fix it up every single time. It was really stressful, and we were just frustrated. It cost a lot of money. So after 20 years, in 2017, the last long-term tenant we had moved out. And so we were fixing up the house again, getting ready for another long-term, and we thought, well, it's going to get messed up again. So we were thinking, what should we do? Should we sell it? And then, sorry.
No, go ahead, finish up.
So
please.
we decided to try Airbnb in 2018. That was 2 years ago. And since then, we've had no problem. The people are really nice. They take care of the house. They follow our rules. We have very strict rules: no smoking, no loud noise, no party, no pets, no shoe inside the house. Take out garbage, bring back bins in. We talk to our neighbors, and they're happy. When we had long-term tenants, some of our long-term tenants actually was creating disturbance. Our neighbors had to call police on these long-term tenants. So that didn't happen with short-term tenants, and we have minimum stays of 3 nights and all
right, ma'am.
that.
You're gonna have to finish
We provide
up.
parking, and it's been great for our community because they bring in businesses, they buy in our stores and restaurants. And I just want to say that it is a small business, and we bring in a lot of people for all the other small businesses in the city.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Okay, we have Lei Shin.
Actually, I'm for the next one. I have a 12, not an 11.
You're right, it says 12. You're right. Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, we have a Christopher Swanson. Good evening, Mr. Swanson.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Swanson, as you know. I am a homeowner on Palisades Drive. I've been a resident of Daly City since 2004. And I just want to offer a data point. I'm in support of the ordinance. A house on the coastal zone just got sold approximately 2 months ago for $1.2 million. It is currently listed on Airbnb for every night for $300 a night. The neighborhood is changed. My wife spoke to the neighbors that are just next door, and they're not thrilled about having a hotel next to their home. So I do concur that the character of a neighborhood changes when $1.2 million homes get sold and basically converted into hotels. And now there was an issue with a light with regard to my association with this property. I was able to contact the owner, or the host, I guess we call them, and they were able to, I haven't seen any change yet, but I believe they will accommodate. But the fact that I can't just walk up to the door and talk to the owner and say, hey, can we work this out, leads to a new level of tension that never existed before. I believe the neighborhood is zoned SFR1. I think it stands for single family, like one family. That's been extended to accommodate sort of in-law units, but to change it to accommodate basically transients. I mean, people that go to Airbnb are fundamentally only there a little bit and they leave. I think that's a definition of a transient, a little harsh word. But I don't believe that's going to help the character of the neighborhood. I think the ordinance is good because I'm a landlord myself. I own apartments in Oakland and San Francisco. So I do think that properties can be managed properly, but there are characters of neighborhoods in which there's long-term tenants, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was the last card. Now, I see there's another one. We'll see if it's on this topic. Number 12, okay. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the last card at this time. Thank you, Madam City Attorney, for reiterating the time to at least receive comments. So we're going to basically close the public hearing and the comments at this time. And now move into comments by the council. Does anyone have any comments or final statements or thoughts? Now's the time. Councilmember DeGiovanni?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a concern about, I remember one lady came the last time, and she had 4 Airbnbs on one block. And then how do we not just restrict, but I don't want to use that word, but we're going to start seeing the whole neighborhoods are going to change, before we know it. And if this gentleman is correct, where people are purchasing the homes and then turning them directly into Airbnbs, or they're remodeling the home into Airbnbs, I mean, shouldn't we have something on the books concerning that? I'm not sure what we can do as far as personal property, but I am concerned about the people that have lived here in our neighborhoods, that it is a neighborhood. And while I get that it's great hosts, but then again today in Hayward, there was another shooting where a victim was killed in an Airbnb in a beautiful neighborhood. Beautiful, beautiful home, quiet residential neighborhood. And all of a sudden, after the victim was found, then Airbnb makes a statement that they're going to eliminate that person from being a host again. Well, it's too late. It's too late. The victim already passed, and they already had a party, and that was, I think, happened today in Hayward. So for us for me in Daly City, I care about what are we going to look at? What are the children going to see? Are the kids going to have a place to live? The last time that people were here, we had people that didn't have a place to live, and there were families. So looking for long-term rentals. So for me, what do we say to them? And we just heard about teachers tonight. So what are we going to do? We can't just change all our neighborhoods like that. And we are building hotels. So it's not about all the time about the revenue from that part. It's about our neighborhoods, people feeling comfortable and raising their kids. Because, when you see families moving in, and then next door, they tell me that they moved here. They moved here from Dublin, is what they told me. And then this is happening next door to them, where they don't feel comfortable and they have a newborn baby, and they're coming in and out their door, but yet they see strangers constantly, and they don't feel comfortable. And we receive video where some people, our police has had to respond, several instances where people are drunk and sitting on the other people's property. So I don't know how we can do that without making it so it turns into, I don't know, how to limit it or whatever, and that scope in each neighborhood. Because all the council members here, they all live in a neighborhood, quiet, nice neighborhood. And I'm sure that whatever their feelings are, there are good people that do the hosting, but yet, what do we turn in Daly City? We're turning Daly City into a target for Airbnb because we're a city of diversity and we want to push out our people. We don't need to push out our people. We want our seniors and families in our Jefferson Elementary School District and High School District to stay here and be able to afford to stay here. So I'm just digesting a lot of this and have a quality of life. So that's what I have to say for right now.
Thank you. All right. Any other comments?
I have.
Mr. Brendan Ventura?
So I'm not really sure it's a workable solution to suggest that we can limit how many Airbnbs are, for example, going to be in Westlake or going to be at Serramonte. I don't really think that that's something that we can come up with a number that's not arbitrary or capricious. And so I don't think a solution is workable by targeting a number for each specific neighborhood. What I do, I like the ordinance. However, what I am concerned about is, do we really need a 9-month primary resident requirement? And I get the arguments about how, we want to have some kind of presence of the owner, but I'm not sure 9 months is a good workable solution for that either. Some of the things that I'm interested in hearing from the council and their comments are, is 9 months necessary? Are you open to a lesser number? Or are you open to an alternative to having the owner actually live there, maybe have some provision where the location is managed? I recognize that there are owners who don't live in the city and who, for whatever reason, they still have a property right to control their property, and obviously if they want to make some income out of it, I don't really think that that's something we should intrude upon. To some extent, I think we can place limits on on the term that they're allowing the guests to stay, and I think that will solve a lot of the problems of changing the guests and making sure that we have some kind of turnover. But so that's what I'm interested in. I mean, I think Airbnb is a issue we have to tackle. And actually, I wanted to ask a question for the staff. Is Airbnb the only source that people who want to engage in short-term rentals, is that really the only source that the market has for that business?
Airbnb is arguably the most popular and most used, according to what we've researched. I would say about 95% of the short-term rental listings are from Airbnb, but there are other platforms such as VRBO, HomeAway, and smaller ones, but I think Airbnb has more of the reputation for being short-term rentals.
Do you know if there is in other jurisdictions, if there is a mechanism for, because the term that's been thrown out here is superhosts. I'm assuming that means that they are a sort of premier, more reputable hosted locations. Do you know if there is provisions in other jurisdictions that allow for the superhost designation to be more, to get more special treatment, or to be their restrictions not as tight because they have more of a reputation for being good neighbors, good hosts?
From the ordinances that staff have read, I haven't seen anything that is related to superhosts. I believe that's a term that Airbnb created themselves. In order for staff to create some sort of provision in the ordinance regarding that, we would have to do a more comprehensive study as to what the criteria is to be a superhost. I would say that it would be a lot more difficult. It may be difficult for us to enforce. It may be easier to have a more laxed stay limit. That might be an alternative, but I don't believe we'll be able to create a provision at this moment.
Yeah.
We need some research on that.
I think you're right about that. And the other question I had is with respect to the fees. Are the fees let's say, compare them to San Francisco, how do they rate?
So for San Francisco, they have a voluntary tax agreement with Airbnb. They do have an ordinance in place. I'm not familiar with what their fees are. I don't know if it's a greater. They may have a higher per hour rate for their staff, which could exponentially increase the fee. But I also don't believe they use host compliance as their source for enforcement and monitoring. They do have their own office, which is basically a permanent staff that they have working on short-term rental issues in the city. I don't believe it would be a good comparison, but we could look at other cities.
Okay. Those are my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Buenaventura. Anyone else?
Yes.
Dr. Rod.
I think these were one of those issues where policies are not like one size fit all. And this is kind of the sticky situations where on one side you want to keep the neighborhood integrity, you want to keep it in terms of like Daly City identity, but also I see the point of also creating additional income, having family members that are also property owners, and also having them also being seniors, trying to find ways of finding additional income after they retire. So I think that when we talk about this policy, it's hard to find that middle ground of community integrity, but also the balance of how do you give opportunities for those that can make additional income. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rod. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think it is, we are trying to keep the community feel that we have in our neighborhoods, and but also I think the issue that is presented by many today is around being the hosted, or and that's what we have in our ordinance, right? I hear it. They're saying that that in our ordinance right now is they need to live in the unit in order to be able to qualify as a short-term rental in Daly City. I'm looking at the ordinance, and we talk about no host, meaning the person or the owner doesn't have to be on site for 90 days. So that's 3 months, not necessarily having someone on site. I'm just trying to look at the different options that we have here, where that means 9 months we are looking at having the owners on site. I think I'd like to know data points around our surrounding cities in the Bay Area, on which is it, how many are hosted or unhosted, as far as like the analysis of what are the statistics of hosted or unhosted properties.
So staff has only been able to find one real technical study related to the stay limit, and that's with San Francisco, and that was done in 2015. And we should take it with a grain of salt because it did occur a couple years ago, but it stated that there was actually no difference between 90 versus 120 days. It's just that anything, an increase greater than 120 days could cause homes to be vacant rather than being rented out. Like I said, it may not be the case now, and if we would like to further study that, it would require a lot of time. But if we're interested in that, we can do that. In regards to other cities in the Bay Area besides San Francisco, generally we've seen 90 to 120. We haven't seen many cities go closer to the half-year mark just to maintain the primary residency requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. All right. I recall what precipitated us looking at Airbnb was the issues and the concerns that was happening in our neighborhoods in Daly City. Safety concerns, parking concerns, noise concerns. And what was done is we established a task force to look into ways to kind of solve these problems. Now, I'm sure that there are other methods that we're still working on to solve some of the problems, parking. But Airbnb and the rentals was felt by the task force that contributed to the problem. So as we move forward, I always try to look at both sides. One as a homeowner, as Councilmember Buenaventura alluded to, a homeowner, we should not be meddling in homeowner rights. But at the same time, we should also think about our community. A gentleman tonight says the community is changing as a result of allowing Airbnbs. Well, that could be the case, but I haven't concrete information that our communities are changing. But what is changing is some of these homeowners depend on these homes for the additional income. They depend on it. They worked hard for their homes, and for one reason, whether it's medical problems, sending a child off to school and they need extra funds, well, who are we to get in their way? There are some investors who purposely buy homes for that mere fact to make it an Airbnb. That is a problem I have. Why did you buy this property in the first place? Now, if you bought your property 10 or 15 years ago, okay, situation changes. So how do we address that as well? Tonight I heard the term superhost. Shouldn't that mean something? What is the criteria to become a superhost? I think we need to look into the status and what is the criteria for superhost, and maybe we can find, as Mr. Buenaventura said, well, maybe it could be relaxed a little bit for them. Then I think about pride of ownership. If you have an owner on site or force an owner to be on site for at least 90 days of the year, what happens when he or she is not on site the other rest of the days? Does the property go to junk? Is the landscape maintained, the pride of ownership? So requiring the person to be on site, does that make any changes as to what's going to happen on the property? Now, I've also heard tonight something about wastewater, garbage. Well, the owner is responsible. You put out extra garbage, you're going to pay for it. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that even though the city could use the extra money and we're coming up with these fees for cost recovery, that is not our prime objective, to get basically money and yet do something that is harmful to our community or may be considered as harmful to the community. You've heard many stories about Airbnb, problems happening with Airbnb, but how many folks here have taken the initiative to read what Airbnb has done to correct some of these problems? True, they're being reactive. What we're doing here today is to come up with a mechanism to be proactive. And I think what should have happened through this task force is to bring the owners in as well, and maybe we can have come to a happy medium. That's what I think. So moving ahead, I feel it is too early not to put aside what the task force has done prior. But we need to consider the ordinance to consider the following. One is the criteria as classified as superhost. What is that criteria? And could the requirements be relaxed for those who are superhosts? I think that's a status that needs to be recognized. Number two, conversion criteria. If you are an investor and you bought a piece of property last week and it's already up on the market for Airbnb, won't sit well. I think we should establish a criteria that you must be in that home for a minimum amount of time, and I would recommend at least 5 years before you can ever think about converting over to Airbnb. I think about our students. Short-term rental. How many students do you know who will actually use a short-term rental? They go to school for an entire semester, which is 9 months. They would not qualify. Revenue generator, I already talked about that. Homeowner rights, I already talked about that. Pride of ownership. Nicer condition. Well, if an owner, he or she does not take care of the landscape or cut the grass, who does? If I'm not mistaken, Airbnb has addressed this. For host, you must provide a notification that somebody has to be notified and respond within 24 hours. So if that's, in my previous career, we used to call that emergency contact. So if the owner is compliant with that, then if you can get a hold of somebody immediately, then I think that should also be considered. I think we should take another step. If you have a 3-bedroom home, then you need to identify maximum occupancy for that home. No 16 people coming in the home. And the driveway should accommodate the cars and not necessarily depend on the public right-of-way to park your cars. So if you rent an Airbnb home, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and you have a party of 20 people, all 20 folks are not coming in 2 cars. You need to look at that as well. So I'm a little bit uncertain about the geographics. Maybe some folks would rather be in a certain area of Daly City than other areas of Daly City. How can you ensure that fairness if you're going to give restrictions on the geographical areas? Some folks may want to be closer to the BART station because it's close to San Francisco. But do you think they want to be on the border near, who we border, South San Francisco or San Bruno? I don't know. So that's the concern, and I would highly recommend that we do not rush on this. We want to look at all sides, but I have to thank the folks from the Westlake area and those who took part in the original task force, because had we had not heard from them, we would not be where we are here today, and now I see the other side. So that's all I have at this time. I think I got most of it, and we can move on. Okay, is there any other comments at this time? Mr. Buenaventura.
Well, So I'm taking from your comment, Mr. Mayor, that you are thinking that we're not ready to make a decision on this today, and you would like more information from the staff regarding all the questions we asked?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's what.
Yeah, so based on that, I would ask the staff to perhaps look at the issue that I raised, which is the 9-month requirement. So I'm interested in knowing, can we still accomplish the goals of what we set out, which is to prevent long-term rental units from being replaced, if we maybe modified that number downward? And what I'm also interested in knowing what other jurisdictions do, and also is there an alternative to having them actually live there versus having, let's say, like a management company do it? So that's, and then I'm interested in the fees and whether or not we're in the market range of what we should be charging. And then also what the mayor said about this superhost status. What I'm actually interested is there a way that people can manipulate the designation to get a superhost status in a way that makes that meaningless or more meaningful? So I want to know how easy or hard it is to get that designation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Buenaventura. While we're at it, I had one more point here, and I'm unsure, but I'm sure maybe the city attorney can answer this, or staff. What's to prevent, and now I'm talking about enforcement, what's to prevent a person purchasing a BMR unit and converting it to Airbnb? Now, that could probably be in the code, say you can't do it, but how do we enforce it to make sure that folks don't? So it's just a thought. I'm just putting that out there. Okay, are there any other comments from the council? Hearing none. Is there, well, Madam City Attorney, in light of what's printed, as to the recommended action, can we make a motion otherwise?
So I will defer to Carmelissa if you want to respond to any questions before I respond.
There are a few questions that I could give you quick answers to.
Oh, okay.
So regarding the conversion of BMR units, in the inclusionary housing ordinance, it speaks to that they absolutely cannot be converted. The short-term rental ordinance is just reiterating that. So if it's an inclusionary housing or any sort of limited rental housing unit, you are not allowed to use as a short-term rental, and that goes with accessory dwelling units as well. In the new state law, there are requirements that it is recommended and required that you cannot use the ADU as a short-term rental. In regards to the local responsible contact person, we are requiring that you include that in your application as a potential service that we would be obtaining from a company that would be assisting us in the monitoring process. They do have that function. I do believe our Airbnb has that function as well, where they would contact the responsible contact person on hand, and then they have some sort of process for that. And if the contact person is not able to respond in a timely manner, then they will contact enforcement. As for the max occupancy, it is defined in the ordinance. There is a max of 2 people per bedroom in addition to 2 other people. So for example, if you had a 3-bedroom home, you could potentially rent out for a 2-bedroom home, you can rent it out for 6 people. In regards to the 9-month primary residency requirement, staff is not particularly tied to the limit of 90 days. As I mentioned before, 90 versus 100, 120. We've seen both, and both have been working. It would really be up to the council if they would like to increase the stay limit. But regarding eliminating the primary residency requirement entirely, that would need to be researched further. And also, I would like to reiterate the superhost definition. It is an Airbnb definition. Not all platforms will be using that. So staff will have to create some sort of definition or some terms or parameters for us to establish who is considered a superhost. And I don't believe we have services that could help us in that enforcement. So it may be difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it may be difficult to do. If you have any follow-up questions,
No,
I can also answer
that
as
was
well.
very good. I'm just wondering if you had addressed all of them. Conversion criteria. Can we as council put a term, if anybody's considering Airbnb, that before they can do that, it has to be, they have to basically, before applying for a permit, wait 5 years? Could that be an option? I don't know if it's constitutional, but, but you know, I'm trying to come to a happy medium between the community and the homeowners. And if this is something that we can all agree upon, I think things will go much smoother. Madam City Attorney?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So it appears that some of the comments that you have made does require additional research, and it would change substantively the current ordinance as written.
Substantive.
So there is some substantive changes if we are going to look at criteria and establishing findings for what is considered a superhost, the conversion criteria. That being said, while I hate to, I know that there are some responses that Ms. Morales had indicated where we're talking about decreasing the length of stay. Those things can be done. Those are the purview of the council, but there are some of the provisions that were brought up this evening that would require additional research on my part as well as staff to establish those findings. I bring this up only because there are two ways to look at this. If we were to continue this item to a date certain, we can make changes indicating the length of stay. But if we were going to look at more or less substantive changes like what is considered a superhost and criteria for conversion, it would require a lot more where I would almost suggest you table it. But I don't want to, I know that staff and everybody has done a significant amount of work, and so has this council as well as members of the public coming forward. But there are two options. You can continue this item to a date certain where we can come back to you with research, but the ordinance itself may not be fully drafted with terms of a superhost or in that sense, or we table it to and give further research, and we notice it to come back to the council with all these questions and answers.
I would suggest that we table it because it sounds like there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And so I don't want to rush this. And so the concerns I have in particular, I'd like to have them fleshed out thoroughly as much as possible. So I would suggest we table it, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Before we can proceed, I have to have a second. I will second the motion. Any further discussion? Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor, Council. Just as an advocate for staff who've been working so hard on this, it would be super helpful to just kind of pinpoint again those issues. So I heard superhost, and whether or not that's even enforceable constitutionally, and what that would look like if it is, and conversion. Were those the two? And then the 90 days versus a longer term.
I was interested in whether or not we needed to have the 9-month residency requirement.
Right, okay, so I think we're talking about the same thing. So are those the three primary issues that I can ask staff to follow up on, so that when we come back again for a date certain, we can focus on those?
Mr.
Go
Mayor,
ahead.
I
Yes.
think also in addition, some of the concerns that I hear from residents that are neighbors of these short-term rentals is the amount of people in those households. And given that maybe it's a 4-bedroom or whatnot, I heard it from the hosts themselves that they themselves don't like to see so many people in their homes. But how are you able to ensure that enforce that? And I know that Airbnb did something around parties, an unfortunate incident that happened in the East Bay or whatnot, but it's just some clarity around that. I think it's around safety issues for our community.
Madam City Manager, on research that is brought back before the council, there could be recommendations made which doesn't have to carry the term superhost, but basically written out, anyone doing Airbnb, if this condition is met, then you won't have to comply with this portion. And then if you want to comment later, that's what superhost status is with Airbnb, because it may differ across the platforms. But, so I'll leave that up to staff. Yes?
I do have a clarifying question, Councilmember Benaventura. When we talked about the superhost criteria as well as the mayor to lessen the standards and regulations, what would you consider as lesser in terms of the stay or the number of, because you had indicated that if we were to find some findings that would somehow justify a superhost criteria, what would those standards be that would be different than a regular host?
In other words, what would the reward be?
Right.
That they would perhaps have more leeway in terms of the stay, and also some of the, I guess some of the requirements that we're implementing in the ordinance, but I'd have to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But my main focus is on, should those designated as superhosts be treated differently? That's the main focus. And I want to know how valid that designation really is, if it's really meaningful or not, and what it takes to get there.
And, Mr. Buenaventura, I think the other side of that coin is those who are providing Airbnb services or VRBO or any other platform, it would give them an incentive to reach perhaps, I don't want to keep saying superhost criteria, but criteria that's over and above the normal. If they don't want to, it's okay, but then we would have these provisions that they'd have to abide by. Okay, so.
I mean, a really quick one, it says superhosts, 4 criteria hosts, that they have to have at least 10 minimum stays in a year. I mean, this is just what I saw. I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure there's other criterias, but
Okay.
it's around,
No, it's no comment, sir. I'm sorry.
but I know staff will look into it, so.
Yeah, so staff will be able to provide us additional information. So, there was a motion on the floor. I'm calling the question. Motion by Buenaventura. It was a second by, who was it?
You.
Was it me? Okay. And any further discussion? I think this would be appropriate for roll call. Voice vote? Okay, it's a motion.
This is to continue.
Can we call the question, Ms. City Attorney, so that council is aware that the motion is on the floor, since we've talked so much, and let's just reiterate the motion.
There's a motion on this item for further research. We don't have a date certain on this.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much.
No, can't.
If anybody in the community has a concern, you can, of course, forward information and to staff, and it would be considered, not necessarily agreed upon or acted upon, but the more information and suggestions that they have may help them in their doing their research. All right, thank you so much. The Boy Scouts of America, you folks leaving? Oh, you're just moving up. Okay, great. All right. It's getting late, folks. Let's move on. Next item on the agenda is item number 12, use permit UPR-6-19-1407, design and review DR 11-19-14321. And we have Mr. Longhausen. Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. This is a use permit requested by Hilldale School. It's a use permit modification. The City Council's granted initial use permit a few years ago and a modification about a year ago to allow increased enrollment at the school. The school is again requesting an enrollment increase, and the use permit's required. The current proposed enrollment increase would be from 150 to 210 students. The site's located at the end of Thayer Street and Florence Street, generally south of Point Pacific. The proposal currently before the City Council is to allow an increase in student enrollment from 150 to 210 students. Again, in 2018, the City Council authorized an enrollment increase from 119 to 150. Because the proposed enrollment increase requires additional parking spaces, the applicants proposed a expanded carport. We'll go through the plans that show where the additional parking spaces in that carport would be provided. Previously approved was the construction of a extension of the Thayer Street right-of-way that would become paved and striped for 9 angled parking spaces and a student drop-off, a vehicular turnaround. Again, this was all approved in 2018. The applicant is currently in plan check for these improvements, so he has taken steps to actually implement this measure, but has not yet done so. The proposal remains the construction of 3 new buildings on the property, totaling about 6,800 square feet, classroom and support space, and a covered patio. Again, this is a previous approval. These are just some photos of the Hilldale School. Actually, the building in the background would be torn down to allow for the construction of new classroom space and the carport spaces underneath. There's some pictures of the school. It's probably a couple years old now, actually. Looking to the east at the school, upslope, and this is the area of the Thayer Street right-of-way that would be improved. This is at the upper portion of the school, 25 Florence. This is close to the Point Pacific turnaround. The council may recall, just going back to that last slide, that the first approval of this project was actually a vehicular turnaround at this location, but that was abandoned. The applicant decided and the city agreed that a better solution would be to expand the paving of Thayer Street to allow a turnaround that was closer to the actual school. These are some adjacent uses. Single-family residential is the immediately adjacent use to the project. Just another picture of the school. This is the 2018 approved site plan. These are the 6. This shows the. So this does not exist here today. This is currently a gravel dirt area. The applicant was approved by the City Council to construct a turnaround and install these 9 parking spaces, as well as a 6-car carport. The current proposal retains the 9 parking spaces and the turnaround, but expands the drop-off area here and expands the number of parking spaces underneath the carport to a total of 12 parking spaces. And this is required to increase the enrollment from the 150 to the 210. There's an expanded drop-off area here as well, and the conditions of approval reflect a gating requirement to ensure that after cars are parked in these spaces that there is not an ability for vehicles exiting this area to, of course, interact or with students that are being dropped off. This is just a blow-up of that last slide. This is the current proposal. This is the 6 additional tuck under parking spaces. These are elevations of the classroom space that were approved last year. And we provide these to show in a general design concept. A similar concept as we discussed last year has actually been constructed in Sacramento, and it's quite attractive. This applicant operates another school there. And these are the modifications to the Building C. This is the new carport area. So this is looking towards Building C, looking toward the north elevation. Students would see this looking to the south. It's just an area underneath that they could use recreationally. Some perspectives of what it would look like, the carport area. Oh, this is the Sacramento school, just showing the design concept in real life. Again, also owned by the applicant. So the parking, this slide essentially goes over the parking requirement and how we got to the number of parking spaces that are required. Essentially, the applicant with 210 parking spaces and 210 students rather, and 20.5 FTE full-time equivalent employees would require 42 parking spaces. The applicant, the City Council in its initial approval grandfathered the school in for 30 parking spaces, and so only 12, 42 minus 30 are currently required. That's essentially what all these bullet points communicate. We provided a slide showing trip generation rates, the number of vehicles that the increased enrollment would allow for. It is not a huge number, but we wanted to just communicate it to the council. It's important for the public to understand that increased enrollment doesn't in fact result in increased vehicular trip generation. In fact, some of the comments received at the Planning Commission meeting on this item related to that, people that parents dropping off are having some conflict in the morning with the existing residents trying to back out of their driveways. The school's attempted to address this concern by sending letters to parents to be mindful of existing residents. It seems like that effort has gone some way in helping to alleviate that over the years. So the modification consideration before the City Council is, again, allowing the increase from the 6 to 12 parking spaces, and considering the parking and drop-off, the safety. We discussed there's conditions of approval that seek to minimize vehicular conflict with the children being dropped off. The third bullet, because this use permit replaces all previous use permits in place for the Hilldale School, allows the City Council the opportunity to place additional conditions of approval on the school, such as playground hours, exterior bells, etc. None are proposed. There haven't been any complaints that we've received from the neighbors that the school's operating hours are something that need to be restricted, so we haven't proposed any conditions of approval, but you do have that ability. The project's exempt from CEQA. the Planning Commission reviewed this in December and recommended the City Council approve it. One of the things, as noted in the staff report, is that the applicant has already begun undertaking the increase of enrollment past the 119 to 150 without actually completing the required improvements that were placed on it in 2018. Part of the reason for that is that the applicants needed to generate revenue and get enrollment started. He does have his plans in for plan check. There is a bit of trust that the planning staff, Planning Commission, and City Council would be placing in the applicant and granting a further enrollment increase. But he's very well aware that he needs to complete the improvements. We recommended that the City Council put in place a condition of approval that the applicant notify all parents that should the improvements not be installed, that the city will be requiring a enrollment reduction as a result. And so the applicant's aware of that. He's willing to provide that notice to parents. And with that, the city staff has recommended approval of the project. So we did want to explain all of that because it's an important thing to note. If there's any questions, of course, the city staff can attempt to answer those. The applicants are also here. The applicant is here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lunkhausen. Any questions from my colleagues before we open it up to the public of staff? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to open it up to the public for comments. I do have 2 cards. Mary Ann, I have you down again. That's for open comments?
Communication.
Okay, thank you. All right, Lei Shin. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Lee Shin. I'm a resident of Point Pacific, and I actually reside on Mountain View. We have to access Florence to get up there. My concern with the enrollment increase is the fact that the traffic is already a nightmare. Getting up that street it's a narrow street. There's parking on one side. It's extremely difficult. I myself has had probably a dozen near-miss accidents this past year because the school does not enforce, they have no structure. So they have created a drop-off situation in the morning, but they allow parents to park on the other side of the street or down the street or wherever they are. And some of them use the drop-off lanes. They also have limited hours on the drop-off lanes, only into the morning. It's probably from around 8 until 9. I sometimes leave earlier, in which case there are many parents who, like me, have to get to work early and are unable, I can't get down the street. And I live there. I've lived there since 2001, and this has been a problem as these increases have continued. There is no structure in place, no drop-off or pickup place for the evening. Therefore, it's just willy-nilly wherever. So you have parents pulling into the driveway of the school and then backing out. This is a very steep street. It is extremely difficult. I think it's dangerous. And increasing the enrollment and allowing more students to be there when the school has yet to effectively manage the students and the drop-off and pickups that they have is making an already difficult situation worse. I think they need to prove to us in the community that they can properly manage the drop-off and pickup of the students they already have before they increase their enrollment. Once they are effectively doing that and they put these new building plans in place which will eliminate that, great, you have my support. But in the meantime, it's dangerous, and I don't feel safe going up and down the street that I have to go to access my house. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shin.
City council members, I'm the representative for Hildale School. And
Yes.
I don't have a card, but I would like to say something.
No. What I will do is I will allow you, as the applicant, to come up and speak.
Yes, sir.
And if you want to address anything, or if the council has questions for you, you'll get an opportunity. All right, sir. Thank you so much. Bushal Hovni? Okay.
You're one of the few that nailed it.
Oh, thank you. Comments, Bill? Good evening, ma'am.
Not used to speaking in this forum, but I too am a resident of Point Pacific, and as a resident of Point Pacific and as a parent at the school, I do understand the concern that she addressed. And I mean, I've made a few suggestions on how the traffic situation can be alleviated. And, you know, it's not an overnight process. You know, you can't get parents to comply overnight. And it's something that, you know, the school has been working on with parents. It's a slow process. You know, everybody's in a hurry in the morning. You know, people from Point Pacific are leaving. Everybody's in a hurry in the morning. But I think with the expansion project and with the drop-off, that will alleviate some of her concerns about the traffic coming down the street. And as a resident of Point Pacific, it's not just the school, the traffic of the school, but it's the residents in the community that are flying down the hill that also create the hazard. I have addressed this with our association. Our association says the only thing you can do is call traffic for them to come out and ticket these people. There are residents who are habitually, I mean, like she said, it's a really steep street and it comes around a curve. They're flying down the hill. So, but with the expansion project, I think it will help with the traffic congestion coming down because we're no longer doing the drop-off on the main road. We're doing the drop-off on the side road. And really, it's 15 minutes in the morning. The drop-off, because the school, you know, kids are being dropped off from 7:30 to 8:25. So it's not such a small window where it's a huge problem. It's just like a 10-minute window where this horrible congestion occurs. But as far as pickup time, again, pickup time is from 3:30 on to 6. So in the evening times, it's not as much of a problem. But with the expansion, the drop-off, I think that will alleviate a lot of the traffic concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We've heard from members of the community. What I'd like to do now is open it up to council if you have any additional questions. We do have the applicant who is here, who's representing, and could answer some of the questions if you so wish for him to do so. No one.
Thank you, Councilmember.
We'll ask you the questions, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you can answer them, okay? Any questions for the applicant at this time? All right, I have some. I've watched the planning meeting, and I'm glad Mr. Lunkhausen addressed some of the issues. And one was, which you've answered it tonight, Mr. Lunkhausen. I didn't like the idea of putting the cart before the horse, and that is increasing the enrollment without coming to us. And you know, you don't have to give me an answer because I know it's already been done, but I'm not happy about that. Secondly, there was a gentleman who came and complained who lives in the neighborhood that it's tough for him to get out of his driveway because the parents queue up in the cars right behind each other and they won't even let him out. And I believe the school says they will try to address that by notifying the parents and they'll try to work on it. The third issue I remember was that is a public street belonging to Daly City, so use of the parking lot, there was some issues where a person wanted to park their car on site. I don't know if it was after school hours or before school hours, but he had an issue. And I thought that was the agreement we had for 2018, that street does not belong to the school.
That's right. Shall I address it?
No, I got a couple more, and you can answer them all at once if you want. And then and I'm sure there's other methods and mechanisms to handle the following, flying down the hill. That's for our police department and law enforcement, and if you make a complaint and if law enforcement can, and I know they will, they'll investigate and go out and come back with a report as to what sort of what they did to address the issue if it's such a big issue. Drop off, the use of lanes. I can't explain why human beings do the things that they do. Right across the street from where I live, the school has a big drop-off area. A half a block away, they'll still double park on my street and have the kids walk to them. I can't give an answer. I don't know. But I guess we deal with it, but then it's a safety concern as well. So believe me, I hear your pain. All right, so that was my concern, sir, and if you want to answer some of those,
Absolutely.
feel free to do so.
Well, first of all, I wanted to let you all know that we are playing a sort of chicken and egg game with the banks versus our enrollment. And the reason why we're asking to go to 210 is because the cost of our project has increased almost double. Once we actually started to do some serious soil testing and finding out what was going to be required to build these new classrooms, the infrastructure involved was far more expensive than we thought originally. So the reason we've been increasing enrollment is partly because this has been in the works for several years now, and we've not wanted to tell the students that are already signed up, I'm sorry, you can't come anymore. But absolutely, we understand your concerns and would be willing to abide by the stipulations that you mentioned. Secondly, regarding the safety, we feel that this turnaround is actually one of the best solutions that has come out of this whole process to the safety issue. Currently, with our drop-off situation, we get about 6 cars or so lined up before they really start going down the hill and obstructing houses, that sort of thing, during the drop-off. With this turnaround situation, we think we could get 15 cars before we actually start really impacting the housing. We could use the same turnaround for pickup as well as drop-off, so that should alleviate some of the pickup concerns as well. And honestly, I think that parents would be incentivized to use this because rather than park on a very steep hill, because it's difficult to walk up and down the hill. It's difficult to park on a steep hill. So if you've got this very convenient turnaround, I think that that would make sense for them to use. Regarding our relations with our neighbors, we strive very hard to keep good relations with our neighbors, and we were horrified when we heard of the incident that happened. It was after hours. It was one of our parents that called. She thought that we owned that street and it was our private property. And as soon as we found out the very next day, we contacted the homeowner, we contacted the people, and the parent herself actually wrote an apology letter. And we will continue to try to be as neighborly as we possibly can. And I think that was all of the points.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from my council members?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure that that is part of the conditions, but how we're going to make sure that this issue is solved, Michael? Is it part of the conditions?
The issue related to which?
Like the lady was speaking of, where the parents are parking and blocking everything, and then the school needs to do a better job, I think, of getting it under control.
Well, after the Planning Commission meeting, and as a result of this, an issue brought up where people related to the school were parking in areas exclusively. I think there was a sign that was placed.
Right.
There was a requirement that any new signs receive an encouragement permit from the city, and we're going to have to review that because the parking in the public right-of-way is actually accessible by anybody. I think that it was actually well-intentioned by the school. They wanted to free up other spaces. They wanted to have people associated with the school parking in certain spots, but the city would have to review that as part of any encouragement permit.
So in your opinion, would this make things better as far as alleviate a lot of it for the drop-off?
Because the whole project proposes a whole new drop-off area, it does make it better.
Yeah.
This is the drop-off. So this doesn't exist today. So right now, the drop-off is essentially in the
Right.
street. And so once this will be a new paved area, as a whole drop-off area. Yeah, I mean, it should
It should help.
tremendously.
Okay, as long as it helps.
And I'd also like to say the situation with the signs that we had up, we were putting signs up for certain teachers, and the idea was that teachers would park there instead of the parents during the drop-off, and thereby causing the teachers not to park out on the street, but instead that they would park there, and the parents would not park there temporarily. We thought it would help a little, but instead it caused confusion, so we've taken those signs down since they're not there right now.
Any other comments from council? There was a comment made, and if you can't work with what you're working with now, why should we allow this unless you take care of that now? And Mr. Longhauser kind of answered my question, and that is because that turnaround does not exist. But I tell you what, if we move with this turnaround, we're going to be looking to that promise, and I'm asking the neighborhood to give you a chance, okay? Because I'd rather give you the benefit of the doubt. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any other comments? Hearing none, we'll close the public comments, and we'll move to adopt a resolution. May I have roll call, please? Oh, is it, okay, is there a
Second.
motion to adopt a resolution?
Motion to adopt resolution.
Is there a second? A first and a second. Roll call, please.
Ms. DiGiovanni?
Aye.
Ms. Manalo?
Aye.
Dr. Rod?
Aye.
Mr. Buenaventura? Aye. Mr. Sylvester?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Longhausen. All right, next item on the agenda is public appearances and communications. I do have two cards. We have Christine Fuller. Good evening, Christine.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Hey. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, City Manager, City Attorney, staff. I first want to send my sincerest condolences and thoughts and prayers to you as to the passing of your mom. And I do have some concerns. One of them, well, I say concerns, some say complaining, but I definitely have illegal dumping going on, especially in particular around my neighborhood. I have to commend Richard Chu from Public Works and their entire staff, because they're the ones who are getting the iHelp information and whatnot, and really making it an effort to be cleaned, especially by Mike Nevin's clinic, here at City Hall. I mean, it's almost everywhere in the city. So I wanted to know what the operational budget for that might be, and if we can send some sort of commendation to Mr. Chu of gratitude. Secondly, I have ran into many more indigent people that was counted prior. Meaning, if I go to 7-Eleven, some are homeless, some don't know where the shelters are. If I go to Walgreens, they're sitting on the side of the building. I mean, I'm the type of person that will talk to anybody. So I've gotten to grow to know these people. They're not just alcoholics and they're not just drug users. I mean, they're actually hungry and they actually don't have a place to live. But I'm calling to the question if there's any literature that we can provide. I hear a lot of the times, oh, go to the website, but I mean, just like for me as a citizen, not as a former commissioner, I'm asking if we have any information to pass out to these people, like the food pantry is up on, top of the hill, something of that nature. I have a lot more concerns. I'm sure I can send a formal email, but those were two major important ones, especially the illegal dumping. I mean, I can't bring any one of you over. You would see a mattress and, chairs, and I mean, you talk to Richard and he'll tell you exactly what he took off the side of my house. So those are just some of the main priorities, but I want to wish everyone a Happy New Year, and I look forward to seeing some progress this year. Thank you for everything that you all do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Next card I have is Mary Ann Mann.
Good evening again. I want to apologize to the City of Daly City and to Broadmoor and to I'm sorry, we did not have a holiday decoration contest this year. Due to circumstances beyond my control, I could not handle it, so we canceled our 20th, but I will promise you that next year, me and me alone will have the 20th anniversary of our holiday decoration contest. And I'm just sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary Ann. All right, that's all I have for public comments at this time. Do we have any appointments, board, commissions, membership, committee appointments? Anyone? Okay, reports, council committee reports. Anyone? Must be getting late. City council reports. Anyone? Okay, how about staff? Boy, you folks pick up very quickly, don't you? All right, at this time, I would like to move to the adjourn in memory. I have the list here. What happened?
Oh, she had to leave, but
Oh.
she left to see if we could do a resolution on
League of Women
that
Voters.
League of Women Voters, but actually the anniversary of women being able to vote.
Sometime during the year.
So,
Can we, well, I like to do it, but it's not agendized. You can work it out? Well, basically, in a nutshell, it's to create a proclamation for drafting a suffrage centennial proclamation, and that's for the League of Women Voters. They're celebrating their 100th anniversary in the League of Women Voters of North and Central San Mateo County, and join 700 other local and state chapters to celebrate this historic milestone. So it's something good, and I feel that my colleagues would definitely. Thank you, madam. All right. This is for the adjourn in memory, and I'd like to first start off with Vice Mayor Manalo.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is adjourn in memory for Anthony Magtagi, who passed away early Sunday, January 5th, and left many broken hearts due to his sudden passing. He was a creative soul whose artistic talents have been celebrated through many circles, locally in the Bay Area as well as abroad. He was a dedicated member of his church and youth group and loved his family deeply and his friends just as much. His adventurous and courageous spirit will be missed and also will be celebrated this weekend at his church, the First Congregational Church of America Samoa in San Francisco, where an expected attendance of at least 1,000 mourners will gather to remember his vibrant spirit. Rest in love, our dearest Anthony L. Awimataki, and condolences to Manufo and her family.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Vice Mayor, you have another one?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you so much. for in memoriam for Louis and Clarinda Chavez, who have been longtime neighbors of my family on Niantic Street. They've moved from New Mexico and to Daly City in 1980, and have been and raised their children and grandchildren in the local schools here. And they fell in love, knew each other since childhood, and they both passed away within about 23 hours of one another. And so they say it's definitely a love that they have for one another. So sincere condolences to Christina Bernal and her family.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. It's very touching. Mr. Buenaventura?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to adjourn in memory of Mahorian M.M., known as M.M. Loud, who was a former student at West Bay Service Center. He was also the first Eagle Scout of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints in Daly City, and he also served in missions in Iloilo, Philippines. I'd also like to adjourn in memory of Edna Macalinao, who was very heavily involved in the Buri Buri Philam Senior Association, the former First Lady of the Buri Buri Philam Seniors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Buenaventura. I'd like to thank Mr. Buenaventura actually for causing this to be listed down. I should have put it down, but Mr. Buenaventura reminded me. Anyway, I'd like to adjourn in memory of my mother. She passed away a few days ago. And not that I'm in denial, but it's been kind of tough. But, you know, you still have things to do. If there's one thing that I can remember, my dad told me at one time that I was almost born on an airplane. He met her in the Philippines. They were on their way back, and I was 2 months premature. So that's why I'm big as I am now. They force-fed me. But anyway, if it wasn't for my mom, who actually came out to California, which caused me to come out when I was 16, and I've been here since, and if it wasn't for her, I probably would not be here in Daly City or up here on the dais. So, in a nutshell, things happen for a reason. So I'd like to adjourn in memory of her as well. Lastly, employees and their immediate families, I'd like to close in honor of Rayanne Yinger, Wastewater Resources Department, Keenan Kime, Distribution System Maintenance Workers. It was the mother. So with that being said, I have no other adjourned memories at this time. If we can if we can pause for a moment of silence, please. Thank you. This meeting is now adjourned.